In the middle of the launch event for a luxury apartment complex, hyped up as a symbol of a green and humane future, Madam Khanisorn, the chairwoman of Sut Tha Group, was giving a speech in a bright red dress when a giant poster dropped straight down from above. It had some really harsh words on it. Cruel capitalist. Before the crowd could even process the message, a human figure plunged down from a high floor. Screams rang out and the guests panicked. The classy vibe suddenly turned into total chaos. But right after that, her son Ki-rin ran over to let everyone know that the figure wasn't a real person, it was just a dummy. With her trademark paranoid nature, Khanisorn didn't even take 3 seconds to figure out that the farmers protesting outside definitely couldn't come up with such a cinematic plot. Someone else had to be pulling the strings behind the scenes. Right then, everyone realized that the little boy, Kita, had gone missing at some point. Just when everyone was super worried, he showed up, holding hands with a beautiful random girl. The surprising thing was that he acted really close to this random girl. Normally, he was a very distant kid, and not just anyone could get close to him. But right now, Kita acted so close to her that when his dad walked up, he even stepped back a little. He only went back into his dad's arms after the girl gently talked him into it. This whole thing made Madam Khanisorn feel both thankful and on guard. That beautiful girl was Vila. When they asked where she worked so they could give her a quick cash reward, she politely turned it down, saying she was just a guest and didn't work for Sut Tha Group. This exact rejection made Madam Khanisorn even more suspicious. In her mind, a good person turning down a reward meant one of two things. They were either way too innocent or way too dangerous. And she didn't buy into innocence at all. Because of that, instead of giving her an envelope of cash, she invited her over for dinner. Vila happily accepted the invite, playing it cool as if everything was going exactly according to her plan. That's because the person who caused all that wild chaos at the event just a few minutes ago was none other than her. Her moves were so smooth and sneaky that nobody even suspected she had set up the whole thing. The very next day, just like she planned, she got invited to have dinner at the Liang Villa. As soon as she walked into the mansion, she said she felt like she was coming back to a very familiar place. That comment made everyone look at her in a really weird way. And Khanisorn's daughter didn't even try to hide the disgusted look on her face. She even started asking questions just to put Vila down right from the start. However, Vila fired back with a few sweet but cutting words, just enough to make those two rich girls mad without giving them any room to strike back. Once inside, her eyes scanned every corner like she was looking at a place she used to know really well. Her gaze stopped at Ki-rin's family picture frame. When she asked why his dad wasn't in the family photo, Ki-rin explained that he passed away 20 years ago, and his mom was so heartbroken that she put all his pictures away. Vila looked at him for a long time, then smiled and said, "You are so lucky." But then she smoothly added a totally cold line. "Are you planning to rely on that luck for your whole life? Because nothing lasts forever." Hearing that, Ki-rin suddenly froze. He looked super confused because he didn't get what she meant, but he still put on a nice, awkward smile just to brush it off. The climax of the dinner came just as out of nowhere as that falling poster at yesterday's event. Khanisorn personally carried a dish over to Vila, and then dumped it straight onto her head while everyone watched in total shock. She didn't beat around the bush and straight up said that Vila was the one behind yesterday's mess. Because with paranoia running deep in her blood, she had already sent her assistant, Pat, to look into her. And this guy found out that she had given cash to the protesters. And the picture he took was the proof that said it all. In her eyes, this was the perfect moment to expose this fake angel. But Vila didn't panic at all. She admitted to giving them money, but she explained it was cash from a charity fund she was working with, meant to help out people in need. She pulled out the full video to prove that she was telling the truth. Once the video played, the vibe in the room flipped so fast you could almost hear some people's egos shattering. Going from the accused, she suddenly became the victim of a misunderstanding. Guilty looks quickly replaced all the suspicious stares. After dropping a few polite but totally savage lines, Vila turned her back and walked away. Ki-rin rushed after her to apologize and offered to give her a ride home. She turned him down flat, saying she got there on her own, so she could go home on her own. And as she walked away, a satisfied smirk flashed across her face, the smile of someone moving their chess pieces exactly into the right spots. Back in her room, she pulled back the curtain hiding some old photos. The memories from 20 years ago came rushing back. She used to have a happy family and a sweet mom who loved her very much. That is, until the day her dad brought home a pregnant woman. Even though Ki-rin wasn't his biological son, her dad still decided to let the woman stay. That woman's arrival completely broke her mom's heart, and she passed away bitterly not long after that. From then on, her childhood turned into endless days of abuse and tears, and she got pushed aside in her very own home. That scheming woman from back then is none other than Khanisorn today. That stunning mansion today was the exact place where she grew up crying. 20 years have passed, and they might have already forgotten about her. But she never forgot about them. And Vila didn't come back this time just to take a walk down memory lane. She came back to take back everything that was stolen from her step by step. Thinking about all the things she had been through in that house, Vila couldn't keep her usual chill look anymore. Tears quietly rolled down her face. her best friend walked into the room, cutting off her flashbacks. Her friend asked if she had gone to Anai-san's house yet, so Vila quickly pulled herself together and let her know that the first part of the plan went perfectly smoothly. After that crazy dinner the other day, that guy Pat actually reached out to meet her. He brought along a check with enough money to make most people completely change their outlook on life, saying it was an apology on behalf of the chairwoman. But Vila said no. She accepted the apology emotionally, but she totally refused to take the cash. Her total lack of care about that massive amount of money left Pat super surprised. That chill vibe of hers accidentally made her seem way more interesting in his eyes. Ki-rin was sitting right behind the wall and accidentally overheard their entire conversation. Right at that moment, an assistant walked in and handed him a folder, and the document showed that their own company guys were the ones who cracked down on the protesters. Out of pure anger, he rushed straight home to confront his mom, but instead of having a serious talk, he walked in on a really sore-nice kind of scene. Madam Khanisorn and Pat, her right-hand man, were getting way too touchy-feely for just a boss and employee relationship. Ki-rin pushed past the gross feeling and asked about them cracking down on the people. Pat quickly took the blame, saying he just wanted to handle it ahead of time to save his boss from losing any money. It sounded super loyal, but the way he talked back when reminded of his actual job gave off a totally different vibe. The sneaky look Pat gave Madam Khanisorn was enough to make the word regular employee feel like a straight-up challenge. A huge argument between the mother and son blew up right after that. Not only did Khanisorn refuse to back down, but she also defended Pat right to her son's face. It got so crazy that she even slapped her own son just for daring to insult the guy she favored. Before he could even cool off, he got a call from the school saying that his son, Kita, got into a fight with another kid. Ki-rin rushed over to pick up his kid. On the way home, the other kid's family blocked them and demanded that they settle the drama between the two boys. Things were getting really tense when Khanisorn suddenly showed up. She didn't bother arguing or giving any long excuses. She simply whipped out a check with a number big enough to instantly calm down all their rage. Once they got home, she decided that her grandson, Kita, wasn't going back to that school anymore. In her eyes, modern education didn't have to happen inside a classroom, especially when that classroom could end up ruining the family's good name. Having a private tutor at home was both safer and way easier to control. You can always pass down knowledge, but you should always handpick the environment. Since he couldn't argue with his mom, the next day, Ki-rin hit up a friend to help him find a tutor for his son, and the sooner the better. While the family was sitting around waiting for the new tutor to arrive, his friend Peter walked in and told them he had found the perfect fit. A beautiful, familiar figure appeared at the front door. The girl walking in looking totally relaxed was none other than Vila. This time Vila didn't walk into a fake, polite vibe at the house, but instead got a greeting reeking of pure disrespect. The second she walked in, Madam Khanisorn looked visibly pissed off. Before the resume in Vila's hand could even prove anything, it got tossed straight onto the floor. In her mind, every single thing Vila did up until now was super sketchy. She made it clear that she didn't owe her an apology, and then kicked her out the door quick and fast. That whole interview was shorter than the time it takes to make a cup of tea. Vila walked away looking really bummed out. But right as she stepped out the door, she bumped into Pat. He looked at her and made a sarcastic joke about how she must have totally bombed the interview. When Vila asked how he could be so sure, he just casually said he could guess the result just by looking at her face. Not stopping there, Pat kept poking fun at her and then started hitting on her, offering to help her score a good job with the right paycheck. The way he talked sounded like he was doing her a huge favor, all while his hands kept touching her in a totally disrespectful way. Unluckily for them, Ki-rin caught that entire scene on accident. But instead of just noticing how gross Pat was acting, Ki-rin started getting suspicious. Was Vila showing up here just a coincidence, or did she do it on purpose? The next day, Madam Khanisorn and her son took Kita to a tutoring center to find a teacher that was exactly to their liking. Picking a teacher for the little boy was handled as carefully as if they were hiring a top-level CEO. However, after all that searching, little Kita came home acting super stubborn. Instead of someone calming him down, his aunt scolded him, calling him a bad kid because he didn't have a mom to raise him right. Those words hit him right where it hurt the most. His grandma didn't even try to stop it. Instead, she dragged him away, yelling at the top of her lungs. Kita cried his eyes out. Right then, an image flashed in his mind of his own mom being harshly yelled at by his grandma. Those memories had never faded away. They were just quietly hiding inside him. It made total sense why, even now, he didn't have any warm feelings for her at all. Aunt Nun, standing right next to them, just felt annoyed and helpless, so she quickly called her brother to come pick Kita up before things got any worse. Feeling unheard and uncomforted, Kita lost control, threw a toy at his grandma and ran away. And right at that moment he ran into Vila. In total contrast to all that loud drama just now, Vila calmly crouched down to his eye level. She didn't scold him or boss him around. She just patiently listened and gently comforted him. Thanks to her teaching skills and empathy, she helped Kita slowly calm down, which was something the adults in the house, despite all their status and power, had never been able to do. Ki-rin showed up and saw that whole scene. He couldn't hide his happiness, because his son was naturally very distant and rarely opened up to anyone. For the first time he saw his little boy truly connecting with someone else. Because of that, Ki-rin offered Vila the job to be Ki-ta's private tutor. But Vila didn't say yes right away. She sarcastically pointed out that he was a real mama's boy, so he probably didn't even have the power to make this call, especially since his mom totally disliked her in the first place. She also bluntly said that neither he nor his mom knew how to say thank you or I'm sorry at the right time. Before walking away, Vila made it clear that adults are role models for little kids. A child who suddenly loses a loved one will take a huge hit to their mental state and behavior. If the adults don't know how to keep their emotions in check around the boy, those wounds will only get carved even deeper. The next day, as soon as Madam and I-san arrived at the company for work, a mob of reporters instantly surrounded her for an interview. The reason came from a video going viral on social media, showing her yelling and getting aggressive with her grandson at the tutoring center earlier. The reporters kept firing questions, saying that kind of behavior didn't fit the image of a top-level boss like her, and even sparked doubts about her character and morals as a grandmother. The vibe got super tense as the questions dug deep into why she would treat her own flesh-and-blood grandson so roughly. Right at that moment, her son Ki-rin stepped up to handle the crisis. He pulled out another video which was the exact clip showing Vila helping Ki-ta calm down at the tutoring center the day before. Ki-rin smoothly steered the public opinion in a way that worked in his family's favor. He claimed that his mom was actually the one who cared deeply about her grandson, and she was the one who hired Vila as Ki-ta's tutor, hoping to help the boy get mentally stable. The video instantly turned the tables. From the image of a bossy, abusive grandmother, Madam and I-san was quickly rebranded as a loving grandma who worried about her grandson's growth. Taking this chance, he backed Madam and I-san into a corner, forcing her to hire Vila as Ki-ta's tutor. Seeming to catch on to her son's sneaky plan, she shot him a not-so-friendly glare. Right after that, Ki-rin tracked down Vila and directly asked her to accept the job as his son's tutor. However, Vila turned him down flat. She argued that Ki-rin used her image in the video without asking for permission, while also using her as a tool to whitewash his mom's image. It wasn't until Ki-rin said in a truly sincere voice that Ki-ta only let her get close, and that only she could help the boy be happy and stable again, that Vila slowly started to change her mind. Finally, she agreed with one condition. She would take the tutoring job if she got to move in and live right in their house. The very next day, just as agreed, Vila stood at Madam and I-san's front door with her suitcase. At that exact moment, the beautiful childhood memories with her mom suddenly flashed back in her mind. But her trip down memory lane was quickly cut off by Nun showing up. Nun straight up showed her disgust seeing Vila step into the house. She even coldly warned her that if Vila messed up even one single thing, she would get fired on the spot. Not stopping there, Nun also ordered the maid to take Vila's stuff down to the servants' quarters. Faced with that bossy and disrespectful attitude, Vila didn't look sad at all. On the contrary, she calmly replied that staying anywhere on the first day was fine, and they could talk about the room situation later. She also made it clear that she hadn't started working today yet, and then casually walked away, leaving off the vibe that she was actually the one calling the shots. That night, Vila was sitting in the living room, taking off her shoes to soothe her tired feet after a long day. Right then Pat showed up. He stood there staring at her with thirsty eyes, then stepped closer wanting to help massage her feet. Vila didn't say no. Instead, she purposely pulled her collar down a bit, giving him a look full of hidden meaning. Right at that moment, Madam and I-san walked in and witnessed the whole scene. She was super pissed off. Pat got awkward and quickly left, while Vila stood still with a chill, totally defiant attitude. A super tense conversation blew up between the two women. In the end, Vila straight up threatened that if she dared to fire her, she would tell her son that she just saw Pat walking out of his mom's bedroom. Whatever they were doing definitely wasn't regular business, because she was wearing a really sexy outfit. Scared that it would mess up her relationship with her son, Madam and I-san had to back down. Taking this chance, Vila demanded that she move her from the maid's room up to a guest room starting the very next day. Even though she was insanely mad, Madam and I-san had no other choice but to accept it. Staying in the house tied to her childhood, old memories kept popping up in Vila's mind. She remembered the time when she was little, seeing with her own eyes Madam and I-san sneaking around stealing her mom's jewelry. When Vila threatened to tell her dad the truth, she threw a massive fit, warning the little girl to keep her mouth shut if she didn't want to face way worse consequences. It wasn't just a verbal threat. She actually did something super cruel. She splashed boiling water right onto Vila. That exact incident was the reason she still carried a huge scar on her back up to this very day. After a night full of old memories rushing back, Vila showed up at the dining table the next morning looking totally chill. While pouring coffee, she accidentally spilled some on Madam and I-san's hand. The coffee had cooled down so it didn't burn her, but Vila still softly said, "Good thing the coffee was cold, or else you would have gotten burned." That loaded comment made Madam and I-san freeze up for a second. The two women looked at each other with sharp glares, neither trying to hide their rivalry. Right after that, Vila flipped her attitude, leaning down to wipe her hand looking all apologetic. However, Madam Khanisorn swatted her hand away and walked off. Right then Ki-rin walked over and asked what was going on. Vila calmly explained that she accidentally spilled the coffee and was about to go warm it back up. Ki-rin instantly stopped her, pointing out that she was hired to teach Kita, not to wait tables. He also told her she didn't need to stress over stuff like that. His caring vibe would make anyone watching melt, but for Vila, it did absolutely nothing. Leaving the house, Madam Khanisorn went to a jewelry center to fix a necklace. Over there, her daughter showed her a video about her dad with a catchy title, questioning the death of the tycoon Tot, and hinting at a possible murder. The video's content brought up old details tied to their family. Heading back to the office in a super angry mood, she immediately called her lawyer, demanding they find the person spreading the rumor and handle it legally. Ki-rin tried to calm his mom down, saying that famous people can hardly avoid rumors, and that the public would soon move on to another topic. However, Madam Khanisorn didn't agree. She argued that a reputation isn't something you can just test against rumors, and they absolutely had to find out who was behind it. Meanwhile, back at the house, Vila was tutoring Kita when two young girls showed up. They came with a clear goal of getting on the boys' good side and scoring points with Ki-rin. They took turns showing how much they cared, from asking about his homework to offering to take care of Kita. The vibe in the study room slowly felt more like an audition for future stepmom than a normal class. Around the same time, Ki-rin invited his friend Peter over to ask for more info about Vila. Peter said he met her in New Zealand, noticed she had great knowledge about kids, and asked to work with her. He also highly praised her skills and dedication. The info was pretty basic with nothing sketchy, but it still wasn't enough to totally wipe out Ki-rin's doubts. Things got a lot messier when Kita was brought out to the pool. The two girls purposely picked out flashy outfits hoping to catch Ki-rin's eye. However, he walked right past them looking totally unfazed, brushing past them like they didn't even exist right in front of him. That cold shoulder made them really unhappy. When they didn't get what they wanted, both of them started throwing shade at each other. The bickering quickly turned into a shoving match. While tussling, they accidentally pushed Kita into the pool. Luckily, Vila was carrying food out to the backyard right then. The second she saw the tiny figure struggling in the water, she didn't even think twice. She instantly jumped into the pool and pulled the boy up to the edge. But instead of a thank you for saving a life, she got hit with accusing stares. Madam Khanisorn's family quickly gathered around like they were holding an emergency trial. Those two girls sat up straight on their chairs, taking turns bragging about how well they had taken care of the boy. And of course, the blame for the screw-up got passed entirely onto Vila, using the excuse that she wasn't watching the boy carefully. Without even listening to an explanation, Madam Khanisorn instantly concluded that Vila was the one who caused the whole thing. She even accused her of slandering her guests. Vila fiercely fired back that if she actually cared about her grandson, she should look straight at the truth instead of defending irresponsible people and blaming someone who did nothing wrong. Those words didn't make her rethink things at all. The reply was a hard slap straight to the face. Those two girls jumped for a second, then quickly got their smug looks back. That slap accidentally dragged out old memories. When she was little, Vila was the one who saved her kid from a stroller that almost rolled into the lake. But instead of saying thanks, she accused her and her mom of purposely trying to hurt the baby. Her dad back then didn't listen to a single word of explanation and instantly believed the accusation. The present was repeating the past like a bitter, vicious cycle. The vibe in the house was as tense as a tight string when Ki-rin showed up. He said that he had already heard the boy tell the whole story, and even checked the security cameras. Everything the boy said was the total truth. Vila had nothing to do with the accident. The two mean girls started getting nervous, but Ki-rin announced he would let it slide because luckily, the boy wasn't in any real danger. His friend Peter instantly asked why he didn't check the cameras before questioning the boy. Ki-rin explained that he wanted the boy to learn how to speak the truth and protect innocent people. And in this story, Vila was totally not at fault. You would think the truth was crystal clear, but Madam Khanisorn didn't change her prejudice against Vila one bit. She was dead set on kicking Vila out of the house. Hearing that, the two girls flashed a winning smile, acting like the thorn in their side had finally been pulled out. Vila stood there so mad she was speechless, but there was nothing else she could do. She quietly packed her stuff, grabbed her suitcase, and got ready to leave. Ki-rin tried to talk his mom into changing her mind, but she was dead set on her decision. Right at that moment, an elderly woman with a beautiful, kind face showed up. Everyone acted super respectful, even the usually bossy Madam Khanisorn. She said she came over to talk business with Ki-rin, but she happened to find out that Madame Paloy's granddaughter was also here, and it was her granddaughter who caused trouble for Vila. That just wasn't fair. She asked Madam Khanisorn to rethink her decision. After that, she turned to Vila and gently told her to put her luggage away. Madam Khanisorn looked super annoyed but couldn't argue with her. That kind-hearted woman was Madame Nami, the grandmother of Ki-rin's late wife, and her showing up made the whole dynamic in this house start to shift. After the pool incident, little Kita stepped up and apologized for not being able to help his teacher. However, Vila felt like she was the one who needed to say thank you, because it was exactly what the boy said that cleared her name. Hearing that, Kita looked totally confused and swore he never said anything to his dad. This left Vila feeling pretty puzzled. Right at that moment, Kirin showed up. He calmly said that she should be happy the boy knew how to apologize, and it would just take some time for him to open up and talk more. Vila thanked him for going out of his way to help her, but at the same time she called him out for installing cameras to spy on her. Kirin didn't deny it, but he made it clear that putting up cameras was only to keep his son safe. He fired back, asking if the reason she was so scared of the cameras was that she was trying to hide something. Before Vila could even scramble for an answer, he stepped closer. The space between them closed up so much that she almost slipped and fell into the pool. Kirin quickly grabbed her waist to catch her. That was the first time the two of them ever had such close physical contact. The way he looked at her was full of deep feelings, and the vibe got heavy with romantic tension. In that quiet moment, Vila suddenly remembered the past, when everyone doubted her and turned their backs on her, but he was the only one who believed in her. Kirin said that no matter how much she doubted his intentions, he would still help her with total sincerity. The reason he helped her was simply because she had saved Kita, and he just wanted to return the favor. The next day, over at the Sut Tha Group, Madam Khanisorn looked insanely mad when she noticed it seemed like everyone was secretly going against her decisions. Even Madam Nami planned to step in and help. Vila assistant Pat pointed out that the woman was getting suspicious about the death of her granddaughter Jingrook. Hearing that, Madam Khanisorn's face instantly went dark. She ordered her assistant not to bring up the dead, saying it was bad luck. Meanwhile, Madam Nami had a private meeting with Vila. She bluntly shared her suspicions about her granddaughter's death. At first, when Jingrook passed away, she didn't suspect a thing. But later on, she found out her granddaughter had secretly transferred all her shares to Kirin without giving her a heads up. On top of that, the Li Sut Tha family kept taking over her business operations. Because of all that, Madam Nami believed that her granddaughter's death wasn't that simple. The whole reason she helped Vila keep her job in that family was so she could stay there and secretly dig up the truth behind it all. Vila asked straight up why she should agree to team up. Madam Nami's answer left her with no room to argue. She said she had already looked into her past. She knew Vila was an orphan, but she totally left that out of her resume. Furthermore, she could see the pure hatred in her eyes for the Li Sut Tha family, especially toward Madam Khanisorn. Even so, Vila calmly replied that having the same enemy didn't mean they had the same goal. She needed some time to think about that partnership offer. The next day, while Vila was putting her heart into tutoring Kita, Kirin happened to walk by. Seeing the big one and the little one sitting next to each other, super focused on every single letter, the corners of his mouth naturally curled up into a soft smile. That was a rare, peaceful moment amidst all the mess going on around his family. But that sweet vibe vanished in a flash when the two bumped into each other in the kitchen. Vila talked to him without even looking at him once. That cold shoulder made Kirin think she was mad at him. He flat out asked what was bugging her, but Vila dropped a totally icy line saying he wasn't a murderer, so why should she be scared of him? Kirin's face changed instantly. He stepped closer, grabbed her hand tight, his voice full of held-back emotion. He made it clear that he wasn't a saint, but he definitely wasn't some guy who went around killing people for no reason, so she needed to stop giving him such a cruel look. Vila just coldly replied that if he had never done anything evil, there was nothing to be scared of, and then casually walked away, leaving him standing there with a heavy gaze. Right as she stepped out the door, she ran into that pretty but mean girl. The vibe between the two of them instantly got as tense as a piano wire. After throwing a few harsh words back and forth, she got mad and raised her hand, about to slap Vila. But Vila calmly reminded her that this house was packed with cameras, advising her to use her brain and think before acting if she still wanted to keep up her good image in front of Kirin. After saying that, she turned her back and walked away looking totally smug. Right at that moment, Madam Khanisorn showed up. That girl tried to take the chance to tattle, saying she saw Vila and her son getting real cozy with each other. But before the words could even leave her mouth, Kirin walked over, ruining her chance to make up any extra drama. That night, Kirin went to the bar his mom invested in to check if Pat was using her money for any illegal business. While there, he unexpectedly bumped into Vila. He looked clearly surprised, like he never thought she would show up in a place like that. But Vila casually replied that if he could come, she could too. She even sarcastically asked if he was the kind of boss who banned his employees from having a personal life. That line left Kirin completely speechless for a second. When Pat saw Vila, he was super surprised. He walked over to sit at her table, poured some drinks, and acted really buddy-buddy with her. Watching all of that go down made Kirin feel really uncomfortable. A weird, frustrating feeling bubbled up inside him, an emotion he probably couldn't even put a name to yet. When Pat was dropping some flirty lines on Vila, one of his goons came running over in a panic, saying the cops were raiding the bar. That news sent a shockwave through the whole place. Pat totally panicked, his face changing colors. But right in the middle of all that chaos, Vila flashed a sneaky little smile, like she already knew something was about to go down. Just a few minutes before the cops busted into the bar, Pat straight up beat down a guy just because of some sarcastic comments calling him someone who hides behind a woman's skirt. And now with the cops showing up, the guy who was just acting all tough instantly switched to panic mode. He quickly ordered his goons to drag the victim away to dodge any trouble. That damage control move happened pretty fast, but not fast enough to slip past Ki-rin's eyes. As soon as those two guys in black left the bar, Ki-rin quietly tailed them, trying to see where they were taking that guy. However, Peter grabbed him just in time and dropped a way bigger piece of news. The bar was in massive trouble. After searching the place, the cops found a ton of violations, way too many underage customers under 20, and bootleg liquor everywhere. His friend also warned him that Ki-rin and his mom were probably about to face some major heat over this bar. Heading back home, Ki-rin immediately confronted his mom about Pat. He stressed that Pat was her employee but was out there openly breaking the law. He made his disgust crystal clear, demanding that the guy never set foot in their house again and stay completely out of the company's business. However, his mom's reaction was the exact opposite. She defended Pat, claiming he was her close confidant, and told her son to stop trying to drive a wedge between them. She also coldly declared that she wasn't someone who could easily get played. After that, she walked off, leaving Ki-rin standing there looking obviously disappointed. Right then, Vila popped up behind him and dropped a soft but totally mocking comment. Maybe in his mom's eyes, he wasn't as important as Pat. She even sarcastically added that his words meant absolutely nothing to Madam Khanisorn. After saying that, she turned to leave, but Ki-rin grabbed her arm, demanding to know how she managed to leave the bar when the cops had it locked down. Earlier, he had asked Peter about why someone would be allowed to leave the bar early, and his buddy told him the only reason a person could dip out in that kind of situation was if they were the one who called the cops in the first place. Carrying that suspicion, he asked Vila what kind of ties she had with the police. She didn't give him a straight answer. Instead, she advised him to get a good night's sleep because there might be some huge surprises in the morning papers. She also made a point that money can't cover up public opinion forever. Her words were calm but super loaded, and then she walked away, leaving him standing there with even more questions. The next morning at the Sut Tha Group, Pat walked out of Madam Khanisorn's office looking completely pissed off. The second he saw Vila, he instantly suspected she was the one who called the cops, because someone told him she was the first person to leave the bar. Vila casually explained that she knew a cop, so she got to leave early. With just a few slick words, she shifted the suspicion onto Ki-rin. She even brought up the huge argument from last night between him and his mom regarding Pat. It was a simple piece of logic, but it was enough to plant the seeds of doubt. Meanwhile, in his private office, Ki-rin told his sister that Vila was just a chess piece. He was keeping her around to make his mom realize that Pat wasn't sincere, and that the guy could easily go around flirting with other women. Once Pat was out of the picture, Vila would be useless too. Carrying a mood messed up by these totally contradictory words, he went home and saw Vila putting her whole heart into taking care of Kita. But instead of saying thanks, he warned her that just because she was taking good care of the kid didn't mean she had a free pass to get close to anyone else in the house, especially the two of them. His tone sounded like a warning, but you could also catch a hint of jealousy that was pretty hard to hide. Vila didn't react harshly. She just gave a little smile and replied that she would consider getting close to someone if that person was useful enough to her. After saying that, she calmly turned back to the little boy. While everyone else was busy playing mind games and keeping score, she somehow kept this surprisingly chill vibe. Or simply put, she understood that in a chess game with many moves, you don't always need to rush to show your cards. A little while later, Ki-rin held up a drawing his son had just finished. The drawing showed 3 people standing next to each other. He pointed at the woman in the picture and asked if that was his mom. The kid shook his head, smiled, and said it was Ms. Vila. The crazy thing was, Ki-rin didn't get mad that the woman in the drawing wasn't his wife. On the contrary, he actually felt relieved seeing his son finally smiling again after shutting everyone out for so long. In this situation, the kid's smile mattered way more than who got the honor of being in the drawing. That brief moment of joy was quickly cut short when Madam Khanisorn walked over, snatched the drawing right out of her grandson's hands, and scolded him for drawing another woman. The boy got scared and sadly hugged the drawing as he ran upstairs to his room. A drawing was just a way for a kid to show his feelings, but adults somehow found a way to turn it into a huge deal. Vila then went up to his room to comfort the little boy. She patiently helped him calm down, and then casually tidied up the place. While doing that, she found another drawing, but this time the boy drew his biological mom and his grandma. However, the way they were drawn made her feel like something was definitely off. She didn't jump to conclusions right away. Instead, she decided to test the waters and see Madam Khanisorn's reaction. Using the excuse of bringing her some tea and giving an update on his tutoring, Vila smoothly showed her the drawing. Madam Khanisorn glanced at it with a totally straight face, not showing any weird emotions at all. That calm vibe was either a sign that she was totally innocent, or just the result of years of experience hiding her true feelings. For now, it was impossible to tell. Carrying those doubts, Vila went home to talk things over with her best friend. After that, The two of them set up a plan so that Ki-rin would accidentally overhear a reporter saying he had proof that Madam In-sun was the one behind the investigated nightclub. The results came way faster than they expected. The very next day, Madam In-sun held a press conference, claiming she had nothing to do with it and throwing all the blame onto Pat, who was confirmed to be the actual owner of the club. Just when it seemed like everything was perfectly sorted out, an old couple suddenly showed up holding a funeral portrait and flowers. They demanded justice for their son, who was brutally beaten at the club and died right after. Pat's face went completely pale when the dad pulled out a phone with a video showing him beating up the victim. Faced with straight-up proof, he had absolutely no way to deny it. The old couple was in so much pain that they charged at him and started beating him right in the middle of the press conference, turning an already tense scene into total chaos. A little while later, inside the office, Pat and Madam In-sun got into a massive screaming match, pointing fingers and blaming each other for the mess. He swore he would track down whoever leaked that video and put him in this mess. Very quickly after that, the reporter who leaked the video was found. Pat and his goons beat him to a pulp, leaving his face covered in blood. From the reporter's own mouth, Pat figured out that P-Rai was the missing link. The next day, P-Rai got blocked by two gangsters on the street. She tried to make a run for it but unluckily tripped and fell. Just as the fat guy was about to attack, someone dressed in black showed up and took him down with one quick strike. That person was none other than Vila. The two losers went back to report their failure and got ruthlessly chewed out by Pat. In his fit of rage, he suspected that Ki-rin was the one working with the reporter, because everything just seemed to happen at the exact perfect time. He didn't stop there. Pat sent his guys to keep an eye on P-Rai's house. When Vila came over to grab some stuff for her friend, she noticed someone tailing her, so she had to slip out the back door. After that, she brought the bag of stuff to her friend. P-Rai decided to lay low for a while to avoid trouble, which was a super smart move considering personal safety wasn't exactly a sure thing anymore. While walking back home, Vila bumped into Ki-rin. Even though she didn't want to, he stubbornly pulled her into his car. While they were driving, they noticed a white car tailing them from behind. The car suddenly sped up, passed them, and then cut them off right in the front. Three thugs in black shirts stepped out of the car looking super aggressive and charged straight at Ki-rin. Even though Ki-rin had that pretty boy look that made people think he was only good for standing around looking handsome, in reality, he still managed to throw some pretty decent counterattacks. Sadly, 3 against 1 never ends well, so it wasn't long before he had to take full-on punches and kicks from those 3 big guys. Seeing things going south, Ki-rin grabbed Vila and made a run for it into the woods. However, they only made it a little way before the 3 thugs caught up to them. Ki-rin instantly told Vila to run and find help, while he stayed behind to block their path. But a chubby guy quickly used a weapon to slash his arm, draining almost all of Ki-rin's ability to fight back. Vila had no choice but to run and cry for help. Ironically, the very first person she ran into was Pat. From a distance, she accidentally overheard a conversation between him and his goon, which let her know he was the one pulling the strings behind this attack. Even so, Vila stayed super chill and pretended like she didn't hear a thing, then ran over to ask for help with a totally professional, panicked look on her face. Pat was just as quick to play his part, instantly rushing over to rescue Ki-rin while secretly signaling his guys to fall back. Not long after, Ki-rin was taken to the hospital. Beside his hospital bed, Madam In-sun kept thanking Pat non-stop, saying if he hadn't shown up in time, she didn't even want to know what would have happened to her son. Vila knew the whole truth but still kept her mouth shut, standing there like a forced audience member watching a play where she was the only one who actually knew the real plot. After everyone left, Ki-rin finally turned to thank Vila. He said the person who actually saved him was her, not Pat. He was also curious and asked if she had ever learned martial arts because the way she fought off those thugs was pretty pro. Vila just calmly replied that since she had to live alone from a young age, fighting back pretty much became her survival instinct. If it weren't for that, she probably wouldn't be standing here casually peeling fruit for him right now. While handing the fruit to Ki-rin, their hands accidentally touched. That moment made the vibe in the hospital room freeze for a few seconds, like some kind of totally different feeling was quietly blooming between them. They both quickly pulled their hands away when little Kita suddenly woke up, accidentally breaking that slightly awkward moment. That night, Ki-rin sent his guys to track down the 3 thugs who attacked him. It didn't take long for him to find out they were actually Pat's goons. So the next morning, when Pat came to visit and acted super caring about his condition, Ki-rin fired back with a totally sarcastic tone. He said his wounds hurt a lot like getting bitten by a dog, and to make it worse it was a dog raised right inside his own house so he was totally caught off guard. Hearing those words, Pat's face instantly went dark, but he had to swallow his anger because he couldn't do anything to Ki-rin. In another corner of the house, Vila quietly sneaked into the storage room to find some of her old toys. Unluckily, the maid spotted her and instantly ran to snitch to Madam In-sun. Because of that, right when Vila stepped out, Madam In-sun was already standing right in front of her, looking at her like she had just caught a thief. Vila explained that she just wanted to grab some toys that were still in good shape to use for teaching Kita. But Madam In-sun flat out refused to let her take those old things away. The two of them even started pulling on the toy in Vila's hand, making the whole scene look exactly like two little kids fighting over a toy on the playground. In the end, not wanting to blow things out of proportion, Vila let go and turned to walk away. Noticing she looked pretty upset, Ki-rin followed her and explained that those toys actually belonged to the daughter of his dad's ex-wife. Since both that mother and daughter had left, his mom always carried a lot of guilt, which was why she reacted like that. Ki-rin even said that if one day Aunt Tianai and Hathai were still alive and came back, he would be totally willing to give the house and everything else right back to them. The ironic part was that Ki-rin had absolutely no clue that the person standing right in front of him was actually the little girl Hathai from back then, the exact person he always talked about. Right while they were talking, the maid came running over in a panic, saying his mom was out in the yard burning those toys. Ki-rin immediately ran outside and confronted his mom about why she was doing that. He asked her straight up if she had ever truly felt guilty toward Aunt Tianai and Hathai, or if her heart was just full of pure hatred for them. Madam Khanisorn coldly replied that she was only doing this because Ki-rin kept digging up stuff she wanted to forget, so she decided to wipe out everything that made her remember the past. That whole intense conversation between the mother and son was quietly watched by Vila from a distance. She didn't say a word, just silently watched it all go down, like someone who understood the whole story better than anyone else but couldn't speak up. The next day at a coffee shop, Vila reached out to meet Pat, using the excuse that she wanted to thank him for jumping in to save her and Ki-rin during that fight earlier. The thank you sounded pretty polite on the surface, but Pat clearly took it in a very flexible direction. He gave a half smirk and said she probably didn't just want to say thanks with a simple cup of coffee, and that there was maybe some other special gift waiting for him. The way he dropped those hints made it super obvious to anyone listening that he was being way too confident in his own charm. That night, Pat actually showed up at Vila's room, seemingly to collect his thank you gift. Vila still acted super chill, and even opened the door to let him in. However, she quickly made up an excuse that she had to go upstairs to help little Kita go to sleep, telling him to just go inside and wait. Pat obviously agreed super fast because in his head, he had probably already written out the ending to this whole story. But right after Vila walked away, she showed up again looking totally different. Her hair was a bit messy, her eyes looked panicked, and she looked exactly like someone who had just been harassed. A totally staged caught in the act scene quickly played out, throwing the whole house into absolute chaos like a poked beehive. Taking advantage of the fact that everyone was distracted by that drama, Vila quietly sneaked into Madam Khanisorn's room to search for documents related to the bribery she had been hiding. She quickly used her phone to snap pictures of the important papers. However, while she was digging around, she found something way more surprising. Her dad's will. When she saw her dad's blood test results from right before he died, Vila started getting suspicious about his death. According to the test results, his condition got drastically worse in a super short amount of time. That made her feel like something was definitely off, because she remembered crystal clear that when she was a kid, her mom was super careful about her dad's diet and health. If that was true, it was really hard to believe his illness could go downhill that fast unless someone purposely messed with it. Not only that, she was also getting suspicious about the will, because the lawyer who had just helped Madam Khanisorn finish the paperwork to transfer all of her dad's assets into her name suddenly passed away right after that. This crazy coincidence made Vila even more convinced that there might be a massive secret hiding behind her dad's death. After snapping pictures of all the documents, Vila went back to her room and kept playing the part of a victim who had just been harassed. Standing in front of everyone with teary eyes, she begged Pat to never bother her again. Even though he was actually the one who got set up by her in this situation, he wouldn't be able to explain himself even if he had 10 mouths. Madam Khanisorn's anger instantly blew up. Pat was so mad his face turned bright red, and he was about to lay a hand on Vila, but Ki-rin stepped up first. With just a few simple moves, he left Pat so dazed that he couldn't even stand straight. In the end, under pressure from Madam Khanisorn, Pat was forced to apologize to Vila. Even though he was probably fuming with anger on the inside, he still had to reluctantly spit out an apology in front of everyone. A little while later, when things had somewhat cooled down, Ki-rin went down to the kitchen and caught Vila looking at her phone, smiling pretty happily. That sight definitely made him raise an eyebrow. It was honestly a bit hard to understand how someone who had just been harassed could stand there holding her phone and smiling so casually. Ki-rin immediately stopped her and flat out brought up his suspicions. He asked if she was really just here to tutor Kita, or if she had some other hidden agenda. He said he knew Pat really well. Even if that guy was into Vila without some kind of green light from her, he absolutely wouldn't dare to just walk into her room on his own. Ki-rin even said straight up that something like that could only happen if someone purposely gave him the opportunity. Actually, Ki-rin had accidentally overheard the conversation between Vila and Pat at the coffee shop the other day. But completely contrary to his suspicions, Vila stayed surprisingly chill. Without looking worried or flustered at all, she just looked at him with total confidence and said that everything she did was only to protect herself. While the family drama hadn't even had a chance to settle down yet, another massive crisis hit the Sut Tha Group. The construction site for their luxury apartment complex suddenly caught on fire, and the flames even spread to the surrounding apartments, causing some serious damage. In no time at all, the news was all over the TV and news sites, taking a huge toll on the company's image. Faced with that mess, Madam Khanisorn and her son were totally stressed out, sitting around brainstorming forever, but still couldn't come up with a solid way to fix it. Right at that moment, Vila walked over and threw out a pretty crowd-pleasing idea. They should host a charity fundraiser to help out the victims of the fire. It sounded totally reasonable, but Madam Khanisorn instantly shot it down. The reason was super simple. She absolutely did not want to pull money out of her own pocket for charity. However, Nun, who was sitting right next to her, quickly pointed out that they didn't necessarily have to use cash. Just auctioning off a few items she didn't love anymore could easily bring in a pretty decent amount. That advice sounded pretty solid, especially for people who wanted to do charity work while keeping their wallets totally safe. The very next day, the auction was set up in a pretty grand way. The items Madam Khanisorn prepared to auction off were just a few old pairs of shoes and handbags that were clearly no longer on her favorites list. Their value was also at the absolute bottom of her collection. Looking at that stuff, even the maid standing nearby couldn't help but roll her eyes. Vila stood there looking at these hand-me-downs, but a pretty hard-to-read smile popped up on her lips. When the auction officially kicked off, the black cloth covering the table was pulled away. But what showed up in front of everyone was absolutely not the stuff Madam Khanisorn had picked out earlier. Sitting on the table right now was her most precious jewelry, especially the diamond necklace she absolutely adored, which was usually kept locked up tight in her safe. Madam Khanisorn practically jumped out of her seat, ready to rush up and snatch her stuff back. But her two kids quickly held her back and told her to chill out. They explained that by now, everything had already been caught on camera and filmed by the press and the guests. If she suddenly grabbed it back, it would be exactly like embarrassing herself in front of the media. Because of that, even though it hurt her heart like it was being sliced into pieces, Madam Khanisorn had to sit still, pasting a fake corporate smile on her face. The truth was Vila had managed to get her safe's password earlier. Taking advantage of a moment when nobody was looking, she quietly took out the most expensive jewelry set. It was actually the exact diamond jewelry set her dad had given her mom on their wedding day. But after that woman showed up in her dad's life, she snatched that jewelry set too. Because of that, when the jewelry set went up for auction, even though the price kept getting driven sky high, Vila was still dead set on winning it back. Finally, she dropped a bid of 2 million, a number that sent the whole room into a buzzing frenzy. With that massive amount of money, she successfully bought back the jewelry set. Madam Khanisorn was so mad her face turned purple, but in front of the media and the guests, she had no other choice but to reluctantly hand the diamond necklace over to Vila. The two of them had another silent little tug of war, but this time, the one who had to let go first was Madam Khanisorn. When the event wrapped up, a local representing the families hit by the fire stepped up to say thank you. The old lady even brought a batch of homemade curry to give Madam Khanisorn as a sign of appreciation. But Madam Khanisorn's face clearly showed total disgust, acting like she had just been handed something that absolutely didn't match her fancy designer outfit. While fumbling around awkwardly, the old lady accidentally spilled a little bit of the food onto Madam Khanisorn's crazy expensive clothes. Just that alone was enough to make her blow her top. She glared and totally went off on the poor old lady, even getting so mad that she tossed the rest of the food right onto her. Seeing things starting to spiral out of control, Ki-rin instantly signaled the staff to cut the live stream. But with just a super subtle nod from Vila, the cameras were flipped right back on. And of course, that entire ugly scene and Madam Khanisorn's totally snobby attitude got broadcasted to the world. A charity auction that was supposed to save the company's image ended up turning into the most raw, unfiltered promo video of the boss's true personality. After the auction, Madam Khanisorn stormed straight to Vila's room with one crystal-clear goal: getting back that diamond necklace she treated like an absolute treasure. She tried every trick in the book to negotiate, from using sweet talk to throwing out cash offers to buy the necklace back. However, no matter how high she bumped up the price, Vila flat out refused. When she saw that talking wasn't getting her anywhere, Madam Khanisorn actually tried to lunge forward and snatch the necklace back. Luckily, right at that moment Ki-rin managed to hold his mom back, telling her to just let him handle it. But Vila totally played it cool, announcing that Ki-rin wasn't going to be able to buy the necklace off her either. She dropped a super loaded hint, saying that maybe this necklace was just waiting for its rightful owner to come pick it up, which was exactly why she had to win it at the auction no matter what. After that, she even told Ki-rin he should drop the idea of buying the necklace back, and instead focus more on his mom, especially on checking out how fiercely the public was dragging Madam Khanisorn online after yesterday's auction. Vila called it perfectly. The very next morning when Madam Khanisorn showed up at work, she got completely mobbed by reporters grilling her about acting so snobby toward poor people at the charity event. It didn't even stop there. An angry local straight up dumped an entire bucket of stinky tofu all over her. The stench of that biological weapon was so notoriously sticky that she could probably shower for days and still not scrub the smell off. But Madam Khanisorn's bad luck wasn't over yet. Right after that, she got word that someone had their hands on hard evidence regarding the fire at the company's construction site. The guy demanded that she pay up and compensate the families affected by the fire. Otherwise, he was going to leak all the evidence to the public. Freaking out over the whole mess, she immediately ordered Pat to keep it totally under wraps and absolutely not let anyone find out, especially Ki-rin. Meanwhile, Ki-rin was also quietly having his people look into the cause of the fire. The results showed that during construction, someone had purposely used cheap, low-grade electrical wires, which sparked the fire. However, right after that, he got a heads up from his mom that some guy had already stepped up and confessed to starting the fire. This super fast coincidence made Vila feel like something was definitely off, like someone was pulling the strings to cover up the real truth. She bluntly shared her suspicions with Ki-rin. She even sarcastically pointed out that while she didn't have any inside intel on the company, Ki-rin was different. He had all the data and full access to everything. Because of that, he really needed to ask himself whether her suspicions were actually right or wrong. Vila even dropped a blunt question that left Ki-rin totally speechless. Did he honestly believe a word his mom was saying? Ki-rin just stood there, his mind a total mess. That night, Madam Khanisorn and Pat were sitting around drinking wine, celebrating the fact that they had dodged a massive bullet for the time being. They were thrilled because all it took was dropping a little bit of cash to find some fall guy willing to go to jail for them. To them, it seemed like a pretty small price to pay to keep everything swept under the rug. But that celebration didn't last long before Pat got a phone call from some anonymous guy. The guy demanded that they hand over 20 million in cash. Otherwise, all their dirty evidence about construction bribery was getting exposed. What they didn't know was that the anonymous guy was actually Vila. She had used voice-changing tech to disguise her voice, since she had already snapped pictures of Madam Khanisorn's bribery evidence earlier. Now she was using that exact evidence to squeeze them, forcing them to cough up the cash to compensate the locals. After that phone call, Madam Khanisorn was so stressed out she couldn't even sit still. However, with her sneaky nature, the fact that she agreed to pay up so fast wasn't just because she was scared. She really wanted to find out exactly who was pulling the strings. So when she got to the drop-off spot, she purposely hung around nearby to spy on whoever showed up to grab the cash. While she was watching like a hawk, a guy suddenly showed up, walked right over to where the suitcase of cash was sitting, and picked it up. But the thing that completely blew Madam Khanisorn's mind was that the guy holding the suitcase was actually her own son, Ki-rin. After that, she rushed right over to her son, aggressively asking him why the hell he would do something like that. She even warned him that if she called the cops, this whole thing was going to blow up in everyone's faces. However, Ki-rin calmly fired back that she wouldn't dare do that, because the second the cops got involved, all of their own shady business would get dragged out into the light too. Seeing the totally suspicious look in his mom's eyes, he explained that he wasn't blackjacking anybody. Earlier, some stranger had called, texted, and sent him a video, telling him that if he showed up here, he'd finally find out the truth. That was the exact reason he was standing there. Right while the mother and son were still going back and forth, someone dressed in black riding a massive, heavy motorcycle suddenly sped right up to them. In the blink of an eye, the bag of cash in Pat's hands got snatched away. Nobody saw it coming, but the gorgeous woman riding that bike actually handed the suitcase full of cash straight over to Vila. After that, she used every last cent of that money, all under the name of the Sut Tha Group, to pay off the locals who had been affected by the fire earlier. After getting back home, Ki-rin was feeling incredibly down about the whole situation with his mom, so he turned to alcohol. While he was sitting all alone by the pool, Vila walked over. The two of them started talking in a pretty chill way. This was probably the very first time they ever had a conversation without the vibe being super tense like it usually was. For the first time, Ki-rin opened up about all the heavy pressure his mom had dumped on his shoulders over the years, along with his deep lingering guilt about the little girl Hathai. He said that if Hathai was still alive and somehow came back one day, he was totally ready to hand back every single thing that originally belonged to her. Hearing him pour his heart out like that, Vila couldn't help but let a few tears fall. She softly comforted him, saying that Hathai probably wouldn't blame him anyway, since back then, neither of them had any power to change a thing. Just as Vila was about to stand up and leave, Ki-rin suddenly pulled her back, leaning in to give her a kiss. But Vila quickly pushed him away, telling him he needed to cool off, because she wasn't Hathai. It was just a short line, but it was strong enough to snap Ki-rin right back to reality. The next morning, Vila brought a gift box over to Madam Khanisorn, saying someone had mailed a package to wish her a happy birthday. However, the second she opened the box, Madam Khanisorn completely freaked out and threw it straight onto the floor. Sitting inside was a super creepy gift that clearly carried a curse. Her face went completely dark with anger as she assumed Vila was absolutely the one who sent it. In her eyes, aside from Vila, there was probably nobody else enthusiastic enough to pull a stunt like that. Vila quickly defended herself, explaining that this had absolutely nothing to do with her. A bit later, while Vila was in the kitchen, Pat hunted her down again and started dropping some heavy threats. Luckily, Ki-rin showed up right on time to bail her out. When Ki-rin reached out to grab the gift box to throw it away, his and Vila's hands accidentally brushed against each other. Both of them instantly flashed back to what had gone down by the pool the night before. The vibe in the room suddenly got super quiet in a pretty suspicious way. Right at that moment, little Kita came running over, which made the two of them panic and quickly pull their hands apart, acting like they had just touched something totally scandalous. The next day, Pat did some digging and found out that the person who actually sent that cursed gift was Madam Nami. Hearing that, Madam and I-san immediately marched straight over to Madam Nami's place to have a word with her. But as soon as she got there, she overheard a group of people totally talking trash about her. They were throwing major shade, saying she was just like a rotting corpse. Even if you plated her in gold, you still couldn't cover up the stench. Hearing that totally set Madam and I-san off. She stormed right over and tossed water onto one of the people in the group. Madam Nami had to smooth things over with a few clever words to get those people to leave, and then she stood there all alone, facing Madam and I-san's absolute rage. Madam Nami bluntly admitted that she was indeed the one who sent the gift. She simply wanted to remind Madam and I-san about her unfortunate granddaughter. She even added that if Madam and I-san was already dropping cash on charity to scrub her own sins clean, she should probably send some of those good vibes over to her granddaughter, the one who had signed all her shares over to Ki-rin. Right while the two of them were talking, Vila showed up. She acted totally surprised, like she never expected to bump into Madam and I-san at a place like this. But the second Madam and I-san laid eyes on her, she got even more furious. She figured Vila was clearly on Madam Nami's side, that she knew exactly where the gift came from but played dumb the whole time. Blinded by her anger, she tried to lunge forward and slap Vila right across the face. But Vila was quick. She blocked her hand and shoved it right back. She totally kept her cool, telling her that just because she paid her to work, it didn't give her a free pass to hit her. And she made it crystal clear one more time that she had absolutely no clue about that cursed gift. Madam Nami spoke up right then, explaining that she only called Vila over to talk about her grandson Kita, and she had absolutely nothing to do with that gift. Actually, the real reason she called Vila over was to ask for her help in finding out the truth about her granddaughter's death. Later, when Vila got back home, she happily played around with little Kita. The two of them laughed and talked so freely, as if all the tension in this house had temporarily vanished. Right at that moment, Ki-rin showed up. Seeing Vila and Kita laughing so carefree like that, he quietly pulled out his phone to record it, as if wanting to keep that rare moment as a memory. However, Vila quickly caught him. She immediately demanded that Ki-rin delete the video, because he recorded her without even asking for permission. Ki-rin helplessly had to delete the video right in front of her, even though his face clearly showed how bummed out he was. He said it was a real shame he couldn't keep that moment of her smiling so naturally, because to him it seemed like only when she was around Kita did Vila truly act like herself. No hiding, no keeping her guard up, and not carrying any heavy secrets. Hearing that, Vila softly replied that maybe only people who had been through pain could feel safe being around each other like that. After hearing that, Ki-rin stepped closer to her, his face looking way more gentle than usual. He said that just like Kita, he always felt really peaceful when he was around her. Those words sounded exactly like a love confession that he was trying to let out super slowly. The vibe between the two of them just had enough time to get quiet and a bit romantic when Madam and I-san showed up, totally ruining the moment. She instantly scolded her son, demanding that he stay away from Vila if he didn't want to end up like Pat. However, Ki-rin bluntly fired back that he wasn't reckless and driven by lust like that bad guy. After that, Vila went to meet her best friend Parai. The two of them sat down to talk and brought up their suspicions surrounding the sudden deaths of Vila's dad and Jingjuk, Ki-rin's wife. The thing that totally confused them was that both of them had heart disease and were always super careful about their diet and daily habits. But when the tragedies happened, their medical conditions got drastically worse in a really abnormal way. Earlier, when talking to the doctor who treated Jingjuk, Vila found out that during her treatment, there were times when she fell into a super stressed and unstable mental state. The reason seemed to be tied to the company shares, as well as her not-so-great relationship with her mother-in-law. Those details made Vila feel even more like things definitely weren't as simple as they looked on the outside. When she got back home, Vila caught Madam and I-san trying to set up a marriage for her daughter with some guy just for her own benefit. Seeing that, Vila bluntly asked if that was truly a mother's love for her daughter, or if she was simply forcing her daughter to get married just to serve her own selfish plans. Not long after that, that guy proposed to Nun right in front of everyone. However, Nun turned him down flat. She said she didn't want to turn her marriage into a tool to trade favors for someone else, even if the person who wanted it was her own mom. Getting unexpectedly rejected, that guy had no choice but to head home looking visibly disappointed. As for Nun, she was so depressed about being forced into marriage by her own mom that she decided to hit up a bar to drink her sorrows away. But while she was drunk, she drove and accidentally caused a car crash. Panicking and not knowing what to do next, she quickly called her brother to come help clean up the mess she just made. But the first person to show up at the scene was actually Pat. He said Nun's mom sent him over to handle everything, and then immediately told Nun to go straight home. Nun went home completely panicked and terrified, still wearing a dress covered in blood. The second she walked into the house, Madam and I-san demanded that her daughter calm down and pretend like nothing ever happened. However, they had absolutely no idea that Vila was standing right behind the wall and heard the entire conversation between the mother and her two kids. Not long after, the cops showed up because someone reported that Nun's car had caused an accident and then fled the scene. But the whole family instantly put on a perfect act. Nun walked out looking like she just woke up, acting totally confused and saying she had been home since early evening and had no clue what was going on outside. Right when the whole family was putting on this pitiful show for the cops, Vila suddenly stepped out. In her hand was the blood-stained dress that Nun had thrown in the trash earlier. Vila also proved to be a fantastic actress by pretending to be worried, asking Nun with total sincerity what had happened to her. But in reality, her actual goal was to show the cops the evidence linked to the case. Right after that, Nun was taken down to the police station for the investigation. Madam Khanisorn was so mad she cursed at Vila, accusing her of purposely trying to ruin her daughter. Even so, Vila kept a totally calm attitude. She fired back, asking if her daughter had actually done something wrong, which was why she was so worried. If Nun truly hadn't done anything wrong, there was absolutely no reason to be scared of the cops. Those blunt words left Madam Khanisorn totally speechless, unable to argue back a single word. To vent her anger, she immediately fired Vila and ordered her to leave the house right that second. The vibe in the house at that moment was so tense that it felt like just one tiny spark could make the whole place blow up. But right at that moment, little Kita showed up. The boy burst into tears, calling his grandma a bad person and absolutely refusing to let his teacher leave. It was Kita's arrival that managed to cool things down a bit. The next day, Kirin tracked down Vila to tell her straight up to stop using Kita as a shield to provoke and go against his mom. But Vila didn't back down at all. She sarcastically shot back that Kirin wasn't exactly a saint either. In front of outsiders he always acted all righteous, but when it came to his own family, he just turned a blind eye and didn't care about right or wrong. Those words hit Kirin right in his weak spot, leaving him speechless once again, unable to fire back. After saying that, Vila turned her back and walked away looking totally cold and decisive. After that, she went to see her best friend Pirai to vent about it. But right while the two of them were talking, they saw a video about someone stepping up to take the blame for the car crash the night before. The case was wrapped up super fast, and the truth was once again twisted by money. The friend who was riding with Nun that night had stepped up to take the fall for her. Seeing that news, Vila got even more furious. She swore she wasn't going to let this slide that easily. Vila decided to start hunting for new evidence to expose Nun's crime, totally determined to bring the truth into the light. To make sure everything blew over smoothly, Madam Khanisorn forced her daughter to marry Put, the guy whose proposal she had rejected earlier. When the guy's family came over to talk about the wedding, Nun could only force out a fake smile. Anyone could tell that she wasn't into this marriage at all. On the flip side, her mom looked super happy, constantly smiling because she was finally about to get exactly what she wanted. In the kitchen, the maid even dropped a sarcastic joke, saying that today Madam Khanisorn was smiling so wide her mouth was bigger than a dinner plate. But that happiness didn't last very long. While the wedding talks weren't even finished yet, the groom's family suddenly received a video. It showed footage of their future daughter-in-law causing a fatal car crash that took someone's life. The vibe changed instantly. Put's family got furious, accusing Madam Khanisorn's family of being totally fake and full of lies. They called out how her daughter committed a serious crime but still acted like nothing happened, and even tried to make people feel sorry for her. The cozy family dinner quickly turned into a massive screaming match. In the end, the groom's family bluntly declared that they would never let their son marry a woman with a criminal record. After that, Kirin walked into the kitchen to find Vila. He suddenly grabbed her phone to check it, suspecting that she was the one who sent the video of his sister's crash to Put's family. However, there wasn't a single trace of it on Vila's phone. Even so, Kirin still didn't totally trust her and figured she had probably just deleted all the evidence. Vila just kept a chill, innocent look on her face, swearing that she had absolutely nothing to do with it. Actually, that video was sent by P. Rai. On the night of the crash, she had gone to the scene and spotted a car parked nearby with a dashcam that caught the exact moment Nun caused the accident. When the truth got exposed, Nun completely broke down. She couldn't accept what she had done. The pressure and the guilt took a massive toll on her mental state. In total despair, Nun reached for a bottle of sleeping pills with the intention of forgetting everything. Luckily, she was found in time, so her life wasn't in danger. Even though Vila really wanted revenge on Madam Khanisorn's family, seeing Nun in that state actually made her feel a wave of guilt. She asked herself if she had indirectly pushed things way too far, because at the end of the day, Nun was still her half-sister. That night, Kirin turned to alcohol to forget about all the mess his family had just been through. Seeing him sitting all alone looking super stressed, Vila walked over and quietly chatted with him. Just as she was about to stand up and leave, Kirin suddenly grabbed her hand, begging her to stay. Under the influence of the alcohol, he spilled his deepest thoughts, saying that he wanted her to stay by his side, and he wanted her to care for him and pamper him exactly like how she took care of little Kita. After saying those words, Kirin was barely conscious. While stumbling around, he accidentally pulled Vila right into his arms. This time Vila didn't fight back at all. She just stayed totally quiet, lying right there in his arms. Maybe in that exact moment, She finally realized that her own heart was slowly starting to fall for this guy. Early the next morning, Vila brought a basket of fruit to the hospital to visit Nun. But right there in the hospital hallway, a woman suddenly recognized her. It was R.A. Guy, the teacher from the orphanage where Vila used to live. While Vila was standing and talking to Ki Rin in front of Nun's room, the woman walked up and called out loudly, Hathai. Hearing that name, both Vila and Ki Rin spun around in shock. But luckily, right at that moment, Pi Rai quickly pulled the woman away to another spot. So Ki Rin didn't catch anything weird. And the truth about Vila's identity wasn't exposed. After leaving the hospital, Vila and Pi Rai went to visit teacher R.A. Guy. By now, she was suffering from dementia, spending most of her time living in scattered memories. When she saw smoke rising from a nearby area, terrifying memories from the past suddenly came rushing back, making her panic. It was the memory of the fire from many years ago, when Vila and Pi Rai were still kids at the orphanage. That day, because a friend took over her bedroom, Vila had to move to the storage room to sleep. That bad luck actually ended up saving her life. Because that night, the room that originally belonged to Vila was set on fire. Teacher R.A. Guy said through tears that it wasn't an accident, but a fire someone started on purpose. They knew Vila was living there, so they wanted to kill her. But ironically, the little girl who took Vila's room became the victim instead, dying in her place. After that horrific event, the teacher decided to bury the girl's past. She said that from that night on, the name Hathai would disappear with the flames. And for all these years, no one knew the truth about that fateful night. After leaving the teacher's place, Vila went back and met Ki Rin to talk about Kita joining some outdoor activities. Ki Rin sat there listening, but his mind was a total mess. Earlier at the hospital, he had accidentally caught his mom and sister pretending to be sick just to get sympathy from others. That made him feel incredibly disappointed in his family. Right then, Madam Khanisorn showed up and flat out opposed letting little Kita go out for lessons and activities. She was scared the boy would cause trouble, and she didn't want the family appearing in the news again. But this time, Ki Rin didn't stay quiet anymore. He said he had followed his mom's wishes too many times, and this time, he would be the one to decide what happened with Kita. Seeing her son dare to go against her for the first time made Madam Khanisorn furious. A little later, while Vila was tutoring Kita, she got a call from Pi Rai. She sneaked out to take the call. Right then, Ki Rin appeared behind her and grilled her for neglecting his son to handle personal business during class hours. He also warned her that if she didn't take good care of Kita, he would be the one to kick her out. This was because he was currently going against his mom just to protect the decision to keep her around Kita. Vila being so sneaky made Ki Rin start to suspect she was hiding something. So when Vila took Kita out, he quietly followed behind. A while later, Vila met Pi Rai and handed her a file, warning her that it was very important and asking her friend to keep it safe. Right then, Ki Rin showed up and grabbed the file. He was shocked to realize that Pi Rai was the female reporter who often appeared at his company. That made him even more suspicious that Vila wanted to give her friend documents to expose his family's business. But when he opened the file, he was stunned because there were absolutely no documents related to his family inside. It was just transfer papers for teacher R.A. Guy. Vila explained that she saw the teacher like her own mother, so she wanted to find a better hospital to treat her. After hearing that, Ki Rin felt incredibly guilty and immediately apologized for doubting her. Later, Ki Rin went to the school to pick up Kita, but he got some news that left him terrified. The school told him that a man claiming to be Kita's father had already picked the boy up. Immediately, Ki Rin called Vila to tell her that Kita was missing. Luckily, this morning before Kita went to school, Vila had him wear a smartwatch with a tracker. So the two of them immediately tracked the watch's signal to find the boy. They kept calling the watch, but Kita didn't pick up. That made both of them more and more worried, because they didn't know where the boy was or who had him. On the other side, Kita woke up in the back of a white truck. It was cramped and pitch black, enough to make any kid freak out. Right then, the smartwatch on the boy's wrist vibrated. It was a call from his teacher. Vila. Kita shakily answered, crying and saying he was on a truck and there was no one around. Hearing the boy in a panic, Vila did her best to help him stay calm. She gently comforted him and then guided Kita on how to open the truck door to escape. The boy struggled for a bit, but finally managed to get the door open. But as soon as he poked his head out, Kita saw someone walking toward the truck. Without thinking twice, the boy immediately jumped down and ran for it. However, just a moment later, Kita was caught by a white-bearded man. Luckily, right at that moment, Ki Rin and Vila also managed to find the place. The two of them quickly rushed over and rescued Kita from the kidnapper's hands. Seeing his son held captive like that, Ki Rin instantly lost his temper. Without saying much, he charged straight at the white-bearded man and gave him a very enthusiastic lesson. Unfortunately, the guy managed to run off before Ki Rin could finish venting his anger. Ki Rin was about to chase him, but Vila quickly stopped him. She said the most important thing right now was getting Kita home safely. Plus, she had something very important to tell him. When they got home, Vila said that while she was looking for help, she saw the kidnapper climb into Pat's car. As soon as she said that, Pat happened to walk by. Ki-rin was already in a total rage, so hearing that meant he didn't need to check any further facts. He charged over and beat Pat to a pulp. If Madam Khanisorn hadn't shown up just in time, Pat might have ended up in a hospital bed. When told that her grandson had just been kidnapped, Madam Khanisorn acted surprisingly calm. So calm that it made others wonder if she was even worried at all. She coldly said that Ki-rin was being too hasty by believing Vila, when she had no proof. Not only that, she turned around and blamed Vila for being careless at work, which was why Kita was in danger. Actually, the person behind this kidnapping was Madam Khanisorn herself. She just wanted to create a perfect excuse to throw Vila out of the house. So now, she was dead set on blaming Vila while doing everything to protect Pat. While the four of them were arguing fiercely, Madam Khanisorn suddenly said she wanted to know all about Vila's background, especially the things she was trying to hide. Then she sent Pat to bring in the person they needed. Ki-rin stood there completely confused about what was going on. All he could do was complain about why there were always secrets in his family that he was the last to know about. Just as Vila and Ki-rin were feeling bewildered, the maid brought a woman into the room. It was teacher Guy. The second she saw her, Vila felt like her heart stopped. Her brain seemingly quit working, and her heart sank all the way to her feet. This was because she understood perfectly that if the teacher told the truth, all the secrets she had hidden for years would collapse instantly. It turned out Madam Khanisorn had someone dig into Vila's background. Pat found out that she used to live in an orphanage. But on the resume she used to get the tutoring job for Madam Khanisorn's family, Vila hadn't listed this information at all. Coincidentally, that was the exact same orphanage where the fire happened years ago. And that fire was directly linked to Madam Khanisorn and Pat. The two of them were the ones who started the fire to kill the little girl Hathai back then. So, they brought teacher Guy here to verify if Vila had ever lived at that orphanage. Teacher Guy slowly walked up to Vila. She said she remembered every single child who lived there, remembering every single face. Hearing that, Vila was terrified. She was almost certain her secret was about to be exposed. But then the teacher stood right in front of her and said she didn't know this girl at all. She swore Vila had never lived at that orphanage. While leaning down, she whispered softly to Vila, "Why did you come back here? This place is very dangerous. Leave quickly." In front of everyone, the teacher bluntly called Vila a fraud because she had never lived at that orphanage. Those words sounded cruel, but in reality, it was the only way to protect the girl she always loved like her own child. But for Khanisorn, it was the perfect excuse. She immediately claimed that Vila had hidden her background and lied to her family. Because of that, she demanded that she leave the house right away. On top of that, she even threatened to sue Peter's school for sending a teacher with a mysterious background to her home. Knowing that staying would only get other people in trouble, Vila finally accepted it and left. She decided to quit. When Vila was carrying her suitcase out of the house, Kita immediately ran after her. The boy hugged her, not wanting to let her go. Vila had to patiently comfort him for a long time before he finally let go of her hand. Before she left, Kita tearfully said that he would always remember his teacher, not just in his head but also in his heart. Those innocent but sincere words made the goodbye much heavier. Getting Vila out of the house made Khanisorn very happy. She even told the maid to splash a bucket of water at the gate, as if she were chasing away something very unlucky. She also coldly stated that she didn't hope to see her ever again. Hearing that, Vila just turned around, smiled calmly and said, "They say you always end up with what you hate the most, so maybe we'll meet again in the future." After saying that, she gave a very cool smile and walked away, leaving Khanisorn standing there so mad she could explode. However, not long after Vila left the house, she ran into new trouble. A thug suddenly blocked her way and forced her into a white car. He took her to a deserted forest. While she was still confused about whose hands she had fallen into, she suddenly discovered that Madam Nami was the one behind the kidnapping today. When Vila asked why she did that, Nami didn't say a word and just threw a stack of photos in front of her. They were pictures of Vila, Ki-rin, and Kita together looking very close, just like a real family. Nami coldly questioned whether Vila was actually helping her investigate her granddaughter's death, or if she was just trying to take her granddaughter's place in that family. Vila calmly explained that those photos were just moments when she and Ki-rin were trying to comfort Kita, and there was absolutely nothing romantic going on between her and Ki-rin. Furthermore, she was still investigating the case involving her granddaughter. She had found out that before she died, her granddaughter's illness got much worse, which also made her doctor very suspicious since she went for checkups very often. Just as the two of them were leaving, Ki-rin happened to drive past that area. He walked up and asked why Vila was there. She quickly said she was visiting a friend and happened to run into Nami. When she turned to leave, her leg suddenly hurt, making her almost fall. Ki-rin immediately stepped in to catch her. But Vila suddenly remembered Nami's earlier warning to stay away from Ki-rin, so she immediately changed her attitude. Vila coldly said that she didn't work for him anymore, so he didn't need to care about her. But Ki-rin believed that even if she didn't work for him, he was still ready to help if she needed it. Hearing that, Vila asked him back if he was ready to help someone who had lost everything like her. Those words made Kirin suddenly remember the little girl Hathai from years ago. Childhood memories suddenly rushed back into his mind. Vila's way of talking, her attitude, and even her actions all made him feel like she was exactly like Hathai from back then. This made some hard-to-explain suspicions start growing in his heart. Later, Kirin even took a photo of Pirai to ask Peter if he knew this person. At first, Peter didn't recognize her, but after thinking for a while, he suddenly remembered meeting this girl at the bar before. The scattered pieces of information in Kirin's head slowly started to connect. He began to suspect that both Pirai and Vila were hiding something. So Kirin hired a detective to investigate further. The results showed that in the orphanage records from that year, there was only Pirai's name, and Vila's name was nowhere to be found. However, the detective thought it was possible that Vila was a name she changed to after the fire, because after that accident, the orphanage closed and many children were moved elsewhere, even changing their names. The detective also mentioned that in the fire that year, one child had died. Then he handed Kirin a photo. The person in the photo was Hathai. This new information made Kirin's head spin even more. This was because his mother had told him before that Hathai had been killed by robbers along with her mother. But now, he was holding a photo of Hathai living in an orphanage. The two completely opposite stories made everything in his head even more chaotic. Meanwhile, Vila went to visit teacher Guy. Even though she had dementia, the teacher always remembered the little girl Hathai, whom she once took care of. Those old memories made her feel that Hathai was surrounded by danger. She kept telling the girl to run away and find a safe place for herself. Seeing the teacher so upset, Vila hugged her to calm her down. She gently said that she was an adult now and was no longer the weak little Hathai from before. Those words finally made the teacher slowly calm down. However, their conversation, as well as the truth that Vila was actually Hathai, was accidentally overheard by a fat woman standing nearby. Ironically, this woman had been bribed by Napat earlier to watch and find information about Vila, and now she had just heard an extremely important secret. The fat woman held the stack of cash in her hand with a smug look. After making sure the money was safely in her pocket, she slowly told Anai-san a shocking secret about Vila's identity. According to her, the girl everyone was calling Vila was actually Hathai. The child who was thought to have died in the fire years ago wasn't actually Hathai, but another child. After revealing that shocking secret and getting a generous amount of money, the fat woman left immediately. In the large room, Anai-san stood there frozen. That news was like a lightning bolt to her ears. Seeing that things weren't looking good, Napat quickly tried to argue, saying it was very possible that teacher Guy was confused because of her old age and mistaken Vila for Hathai. But Anai-san didn't believe that explanation easily. With a cold gaze, she immediately ordered Napat to investigate clearly whether Vila was truly Hathai. There was a scary cruelty in her voice as she said that if she really were Hathai, she must not be allowed to exist in this world. No one knew that the entire conversation had been overheard by Nun standing outside. The young girl immediately walked in, her face full of shock and anger. Nun questioned her mother about why she had lied to her for all these years. Since she was a child, her mother had told her that her sister Hathai had died with her mother in a robbery attack. But now her own ears had heard a completely different truth. Nun tearfully said that no matter what, Hathai was her biological sister, so why could her mother be so heartless? But Anai-san replied to her daughter with words that were coldly cruel. She said that if Hathai were still alive and came back, she would steal everything Nun had, from her status and life to everyone's affection. She even reminded her that it was because Nun accidentally gave Hathai's postcard to Kirin years ago that she was able to track down the girl's address. Those words were like adding fuel to the fire, making Nun feel like she was the one who had indirectly helped her mother harm her sister. Nun couldn't accept that cruel truth. With tears rolling down her cheeks, Nun turned and ran away, her heart feeling torn apart. Not long after that, Napat found out the truth. Vila was indeed the little girl Hathai from back then. When she got this news, Anai-san felt like she had died standing up. Every nerve in her body went stiff. A mix of anger and fear made her almost go crazy, wanting to find a place to vent all the rage in her heart. To strengthen her power and the family's financial strength, Anai-san began calculating new moves. She was determined to arrange marriages based on benefits. Her son had to marry into a powerful family, and her daughter Nun was no exception. The target she was aiming for was a young man named Sinha, the only son of the famous politician Sarah. He had just returned from the US to help his father manage the family business. Before that, in a bar, Sinha had intentionally approached Nun with a calculated hero saving the beauty act. Not long after, he visited Anai-san's house to strengthen their relationship. Of course, she couldn't miss this golden opportunity, so she tried her best to set up Sinha with her daughter. During dinner that night, she intentionally said that the apple pie Sinha was eating was handmade by Nun, and that she was very thoughtful and understood him. But when Sinha asked Nun if she liked baking, she just sat there silently like a wooden statue. Then she coldly replied that she didn't like baking at all, and was just forced to do it by her mother. The vibe of the meal immediately became awkward. Seeing this, Inai-sun quickly explained that Nun's mood hadn't been good lately because she was once suspected of causing a hit-and-run accident. Hearing this, Sinha immediately took the chance to show off his power. He assured Inai-sun that he would handle everyone who had spread rumors and caused trouble for her family. Those words made Inai-sun feel overjoyed. She gave a satisfied smile because a new plan was starting to form in her head, using Sinha's power while step-by-step getting rid of the threat named Hathai. Right after that, to prove he was worthy of being a future son-in-law in front of Inai-sun, Sinha decided to personally deal with Vila. The next day, Vila went to the house of a maid named Kop to ask about the whereabouts of a woman named Rit. Vila had to promise to lend her money to help her son, who was tricked into smuggling, before she would give her the address. But when she arrived at the address Kop gave her, all she saw was a cold, abandoned house, ruined and full of dust. Before she could understand what was happening, Sinha suddenly appeared. In fact, this was a sophisticated plan that Sinha had set up to lure Vila there. Vila immediately questioned him on why he tricked her. But Sinha just smirked and said that because she dared to threaten Nun and Inai-sun, he was stepping up to deal with her. As soon as he finished speaking, he slapped Vila hard, making her fall to the floor. Not stopping there, he ordered his goons to rush in and beat her within an inch of her life. While being beaten until exhausted and collapsing on the cold floor, Vila suddenly saw a woman's body under the bed. And that woman was none other than the person she had been searching for all this time. Sinha had prepared a perfect plan. He forged a suicide note and told his goons to throw it into the room, then locked the door to frame the scene as if Vila had committed suicide. In that life-or-death moment, Vila only remembered her beloved mother. The image of her kind mother appeared in her mind, making her eyes go blurry, and then she slowly sank into the darkness and passed out. That night, in Inai-sun's luxurious mansion, the vibe was completely the opposite. She was sitting back comfortably watching the news on her phone with a very satisfied look. The news report had just mentioned a fire in the forest where a charred body was found, but the identity hadn't been determined yet. Hearing that news, Inai-sun gave a very smug smile. She coldly said that she had let Vila escape once before, but this time she definitely wouldn't survive. In the room next door, Nun was drowning in horrible guilt. After learning the secret that her mother had lied about Hathai's death, she felt extremely guilty. Unable to take the pressure in her heart, Nun turned to alcohol to forget everything. When her brother walked into the room, Nun felt like she had found a place to vent. While drunk, she tearfully said that in this very house, she was no different from a locked-up prisoner with no right to decide her own life. Her mother forced her to love and marry someone she had no feelings for. Not only that, Nun also told the truth about Hathai. She said that Hathai didn't die with her mother in that robbery years ago, but had been sent to an orphanage. And because she gave the postcard that Hathai sent to Ki-rin while she was at the orphanage, her mother found out her address. She had unintentionally helped her mother find Hathai, and from there, she was able to send people to hunt her sister down. That thought made Nun's heart heavy with guilt. After Madam Inai-sun thought she finally got rid of the thorn in her side, she happily organized a big press conference to announce Ki-rin's engagement to a girl named Min, whom she had handpicked for the family's gain. Before that, she had even threatened Ki-rin, saying that if he didn't agree, little Kita would be shipped off to study abroad immediately. She coldly told him that every choice he made today would directly hit the boy's future. A few minutes later, the press conference officially kicked off. Ki-rin and Nun walked into the event looking very relaxed, not at all like the gloomy state they were in the night before. It seemed like a sign that something big was about to go down. In front of a crowd of reporters, Madam Inai-sun asked Ki-rin to announce the marriage. The girl named Min happily stepped up next to him, eagerly waiting to hear her name called in front of the whole media. But something nobody saw coming happened. Ki-rin calmly announced to everyone that he was already married. That one line sent a shockwave through the whole room. People started buzzing with gossip, while the girl standing next to him was frozen in shock, her face stiff because she couldn't believe her ears. Not stopping there, Ki-rin said he wanted to take this chance to introduce his wife to everyone. All eyes immediately swung toward the large doors of the hall. When the doors slowly opened, a girl in an elegant white dress walked in. It was none other than Vila. Her appearance left Madam Inai-sun and everyone there wide-eyed with shock, their mouths hanging open without a word. No one could believe what they were seeing. Madam Inai-sun was even more stunned. She never expected Vila to escape death again, because in her mind, that girl should have died in the fire the other day. Then Vila confidently stepped onto the stage, forcefully pulled Min's hand away from Ki-rin, and took her place. Everything happened so fast, completely catching Madam Inai-sun off guard, leaving her so mad she lost all control. She didn't just scream at her son but even tried to lay a hand on Vila. But this time Ki-rin wasn't weak like before. He stepped up to shield and protect the woman he loved. Now, even if it was just a staged marriage, Vila was legally and officially his wife. Earlier, during the fire at the abandoned house, just as Vila was nearly choking in the thick smoke, Ki-rin showed up right in time to save her. He rushed her to the hospital and then went back to her apartment to grab some clothes. That was when he discovered the shocking truth. Vila was actually Hathai, the girl he had been missing for all those years. When he returned to the hospital and confirmed this, he was so overwhelmed with joy that he pulled her into a hug, tearfully saying he would make up for everything and return everything that belonged to her and the Sut Tha family. Hearing that promise only made Vila burst into tears of frustration. She painfully asked him how he could ever make up for the losses for her life, and for the people who died because of him. Faced with her breakdown, Ki-rin could only hold her tight, swearing he would fix his mistakes by marrying her. He promised to keep her identity a secret, and not let his mother find out. However, he had no idea that Madam Khanisorn already knew everything, and was secretly looking for ways to harm Vila. The next day, Vila walked into Madam Khanisorn's house but was immediately blocked and told to leave. Without flinching, she pulled out the marriage certificate. But she got so mad she tore it to shreds and threw it in her face. Right then, Ki-rin stepped up to protect his wife, demanding his mother show her some respect. Vila also pulled out Ki-ta's passport and plane tickets, announcing that she couldn't take the boy anywhere anymore. Ki-rin added that Ki-ta was his son, and from now on, she couldn't use the boy to threaten him again. The two of them even went out of their way to act lovey-dovey in front of Madam Khanisorn, making her even more furious. When Ki-ta found out Vila was back, the boy was so happy he gave her a big hug. Hearing Vila say she would be staying in the house from now on as his dad's wife, the boy's face went pale and he backed away as if he were protesting. But then suddenly, he cheered with joy and hugged them both. At that moment, the three of them looked like a truly happy family. That night in the room, Ki-rin left Vila a bit flustered when he suddenly moved close to her. She panicked, thinking he was going to do something, but he was actually just grabbing his stuff to take a shower. He said he'd keep his promise. This room was hers and he would sleep with Ki-ta. When Vila asked how long this fake marriage would last, he said until he returned everything that belonged to her family and moved his mother and sister out of the house. He told her to be patient and not to act too fast. Early the next morning, Vila woke up acting like the true lady of the house. The first thing she did wasn't making breakfast, but rearranging the feng shui of the home, specifically taking down Madam Khanisorn's photo and replacing it with a picture of her and Ki-rin. This move quickly made Nun blow up as soon as she saw it. Nun questioned how she dared to do such a thing. Vila calmly fired back with total confidence, asserting her rights in the house while hinting that Madam Khanisorn and her daughter were now just guests staying there. Unable to hold back her rage, Nun lunged at Vila to attack her, but she was immediately countered and taken down with ease. Right then, Madam Khanisorn showed up, but when she saw Vila wearing the first wife's jewelry, she froze. That image brought back the shadow of T&I from years ago, making her unconsciously step back as if the past had suddenly reappeared right before her eyes. The things she thought were buried seemed to just be waiting for a chance to pop up again. And Vila was the one bringing it all back. Later in the kitchen, while Vila was making coffee, Madam Khanisorn walked in to intimidate her. However, Vila took charge by holding up the coffee pot as a warning. The move didn't need words, but it sent the message loud and clear. That moment made Madam Khanisorn flash back to the past when she had used a similar way to hurt Vila. This role reversal made her feel fear for the first time, as if she might become the one to suffer through what Vila had tasted before. Just as things got super tense, Ki-rin showed up and pulled Vila outside. He grilled her about her actions, but Vila stayed chill, saying she was just doing her job, and that his mother's reaction came from her own past trauma. Their conversation was getting pretty heated when Peter suddenly showed up. Misunderstanding the situation and thinking Vila was being bullied, he immediately stepped up to protect her. However, Ki-rin quickly made it clear that this was their private business as a couple, and didn't need any outside interference. Peter's appearance made the vibe even more tense, especially as Ki-rin's jealousy started to show. The two men almost got into a fight, but luckily Vila stepped in right in time before things went too far. Leaving the house, Vila went to see Madam Nami. Nami was clearly unhappy that Vila hadn't kept her earlier promise to stay away from Ki-rin. Faced with that blame, Vila didn't dodge it and explained things bluntly. She declared that even though she was married, she wouldn't touch anything belonging to her granddaughter, while also keeping her promise to investigate the truth about her death to the very end. The firmness and sincerity in Vila's words slowly made Madam Nami calm down. When Vila got back home and walked into her room, she was surprised to find Ki-rin inside. This immediately annoyed her, because he had already made it clear this room was hers and he was moving in with Ki-ta. However, Ki-rin's excuse was to keep others from getting suspicious about their relationship. He still kept his clothes and daily routine in the old room as if nothing had changed. Not stopping there, Ki-rin moved closer and directly questioned where Vila had been, even suspecting she had just met Peter. Vila refused to answer, and her silence only made Ki-rin even more irritated. In a not-so-hidden fit of jealousy, he pushed her down onto the bed and wouldn't let go. He basically made a deal that he'd only stop once she answered him. The vibe in the room instantly got tense in a very ambiguous way. Suddenly, Ki-ta opened the door and walked in. With total childhood innocence, the boy looked at them and asked a very blunt question. If they were fighting. The simple question was enough to make them both jump up instantly, each standing on their own side with an awkwardness that was hard to hide. The next morning at work, Peter got a bouquet of flowers with a note from Vila asking to meet him, but it said to keep it a secret. The invite made him really happy, though he had no clue it was actually an anonymous letter and the start of a carefully staged setup. At the agreed time and place, Peter showed up at the bar. Coincidentally, Vila appeared there too, but she was there to meet Madam Nami for a different appointment. While waiting, a server brought her a glass of wine, saying it was for Madam Nami. In reality, it was all part of a plan cooked up by Madam Khanisorn and Madam Nami to stage a perfect caught in the act moment. According to the script, Ki-rin and Madam Khanisorn would also show up right on time to witness everything. However, things started to go off the rails when, just before Vila was about to drink the wine, Ploy showed up to warn her to leave if she didn't want to get framed. She revealed it was a trap and didn't want her to be a victim. Vila left right away. Ploy drank the wine and quickly felt abnormally dizzy. Right then, Peter walked in and being out of control, she stumbled and pulled him down onto the couch with her, creating a scene that was very easy to misunderstand. At that exact moment, Ki-rin and Madam Khanisorn burst into the room to catch them in the act. But instead of Vila, the person they saw was Madam Nami's granddaughter. The fact that things went totally sideways from the plan left them both stunned. Realizing something was wrong, they immediately looked around for Vila. Meanwhile, Peter had also found out the truth from Ploy. He sarcastically asked if their perfect timing meant the whole thing was staged from the start. He bluntly said that while he wasn't perfect, he wouldn't act so thoughtlessly. He even turned to scold Ki-rin for not trusting the woman he loved. None wasn't off the hook either, as Peter pointed out that someone who didn't understand true love like her would find it hard to believe in a sincere connection between people. Those words were soft but hurt worse than a knife cut. None couldn't hide her anger and left right after. Meanwhile, Ki-rin had to apologize to Peter, trying to explain that it was all just a misunderstanding. The next day, to keep his promise to Vila, Ki-rin handed her his first asset, his shares in the Rabbit Company. Holding those shares, Vila quickly called a shareholder meeting at Rabbit the very next day. Her showing up in the meeting room surprised many people, especially Madam Nami. When she saw Vila walk in, she immediately thought she was just there as Ki-rin's rep. But Vila calmly corrected her, saying she didn't represent anyone because right now, she was the company's largest shareholder. This news was like a lightning bolt to Madam Nami losing her cool. She lunged at Vila, questioning why she was taking shares that originally belonged to her granddaughter. However, Vila didn't flinch. She bluntly said that in business, changing shareholders is totally normal, and this company never belonged solely to Madam Nami's family, but to all the shareholders. Plus, she subtly reminded her that it was thanks to Ki-rin's support that the company was able to stand strong again. So Madam Nami's idea that the company was hers alone was a bit outdated. After the meeting, Madam Nami kept chasing Vila to scream at her. She called Vila greedy, saying she didn't just want to take her man but also her granddaughter's assets. But Vila fired back in a very chill way, saying Madam Nami was the selfish one. She had trusted her, but the older woman had planned to stab her in the back, so she had to act like this. Not stopping at words, Vila also announced she would be canceling all of Madam Nami's positions in the company, using the excuse that she was too old and frequently lost control of her emotions. Later, Ploy reached out to meet Vila at a coffee shop. She apologized on behalf of Madam Nami for what had happened, while also hoping Vila wouldn't completely kick her out of the company over old history, since her grandmother had put so much heart into it. However, Vila stuck to her decision, only saying there was a specific reason for removing Madam Nami from management, and she'd explain at the right time. She also promised that once things were settled, they'd talk again about the shares she held, which originally belonged to Ploy's sister. The next day, after seeing a video of Madam Nami losing it in the shareholder meeting, Madam Khanisorn found out that Ki-rin had transferred all the Rabbit Company shares to Vila. This news left her super worried because the plan to merge Rabbit with the Sut Tha Group was now trashed. Standing nearby, Pat didn't forget to add fuel to the fire by hinting that Ki-rin might be so hypnotized by Vila that he was ready to hand over all the group's assets to her. This made Madam Khanisorn even more anxious. Without waiting, she immediately decided to call a shareholder meeting. But this time she purposely didn't let Ki-rin know. The conversation accidentally reached the ears of Ki-rin's assistant. Right after that, the assistant called Ki-rin to report that his mother was setting up an emergency shareholder meeting. Even though he had the info, Ki-rin still didn't know the real goal behind this meeting. Taking advantage of the time Ki-rin and Vila took Kita to school, Madam Khanisorn quickly gathered the shareholders at her home under the guise of an important announcement. She announced her plan to give the CEO position of the group to her daughter, Nun, and wanted everyone to agree before the official meeting. However, not everyone agreed easily. One shareholder questioned why the choice was Nun and not Ki-rin, since all the prep before seemed to point to him. Madam Khanisorn immediately used the excuse that Nun was the daughter of Mr. Tot and the only descendant of the Sut Tha bloodline, so she was the one who deserved the spot. That shareholder bluntly said he'd only accept it if Ki-rin was the leader, because in his eyes, ability was more important than bloodline. Some other shareholders agreed and were about to leave. But right then Mr. Sarah and his son Singh Ha showed up, demanding that no one leave until everything was settled. To make sure the result went their way, Singh Ha pulled out evidence showing that the shareholders had taken bribes in the past. This valuable info forced the shareholders to agree with Madam and I's plan. After getting what they wanted, Mr. Sarah and his son left looking pretty relaxed, as if they had just finished a win-win deal. Before leaving, he hinted that he'd be waiting for the day Nun officially took office, while also hoping both families would have more good news soon. This left Nun pretty confused, but when she asked about it, Madam and I's just brushed it off, telling her to focus on work. That night when Vila walked into her room, she found the maid cop was there. Just one look was enough to see that the woman suspected she and Kirin weren't staying in the same room. To avoid trouble later, Vila decided to fix this suspicion once and for all. While Kirin was having tea in the garden, she explained Cop's suspicion and asked him to stay over for one night to keep up appearances. Hearing this, Kirin could hardly hide his happiness. He even suggested that if they were scared of being suspected, they should do this more often, though Vila only agreed to one single night. When Kirin noticed Cop was secretly watching, he immediately acted even more than necessary by picking Vila up and carrying her into the room. But when the door closed, his confidence from earlier vanished pretty fast. Truly being in the same room with Vila for the first time made him look obviously awkward. He just stood there not knowing what to do next. Only when Vila dropped a hint, asking if he was going to sleep standing up, did he finally get into position. The vibe settled down, and he started to open his heart. He said every moment with Vila was meaningful, and he wanted her not to regret what they were going through. He promised to try to return everything that belonged to her. She bluntly asked if he was scared of his mother getting hurt. Kirin replied with a pretty simple trust. No matter what, he was still her son, and he believed his mother would eventually forgive them. His sincerity made Vila feel totally torn. Originally, she walked into this house for revenge, but what Kirin was giving her made everything way more complicated. With a face full of tears, she admitted that hating him would be easier, because if she hated him, she wouldn't have to feel this guilty. Kirin asked her how she really felt about him if she wasn't mad or hateful. Her silence after that became the clearest answer to the feelings in her heart. Realizing that, Kirin moved closer, wanting to use a kiss to prove his feelings. But right at that romantic moment, Kirin suddenly had a heart attack and collapsed onto the floor, leaving Vila in a total panic. Right after that, Kirin was rushed to the hospital. There, the doctor told the family that his blood contained amphetamines, a substance found in illegal drugs. This news left everyone in total shock, because no one had ever seen Kirin involved with drugs before. While everyone was still panicking, Madam and I's immediately shot a suspicious look at Vila, as if she already had the answer. With that suspicion in mind, while Vila stayed at the hospital to care for Kirin, Madam and I's Nun, and Pat quietly went back home to look for evidence. They quickly tore Vila's room apart, and then they happened to find a packet of powder in her handbag. When Vila returned from the hospital, the second she walked into the house, Madam and I's blocked her. The packet of powder was pulled out as proof to accuse her of poisoning Kirin. In a fit of rage, she even lunged forward to hit her, but luckily Pat and Nun stopped her just in time. In the middle of all that chaos, Vila stayed chill. She bluntly denied hurting Kirin and insisted that packet wasn't hers. Not stopping at just defending herself, she fired back, asking if Madam and I's was the one who set the whole thing up to frame her. Vila also pointed out that in this house, anyone could be a suspect, and she would find the truth to prove she was being framed. After saying that, she turned and walked away. Vila's words made Nun start to waver. She turned to ask her mom if there was a chance what Vila said was true. However, Madam and I's immediately denied it, swearing there was no way she would ever hurt her own son. The next day, Peter went to the hospital to visit Kirin. The vibe there wasn't pleasant either. Madam and I's kept acting furious with Vila and demanded she stay away from her son. She even told Peter that Vila was the one who put Kirin in this state. While the argument was going down, Kirin suddenly woke up, making everyone instantly focus on him. But instead of asking how her son was doing, the first thing Madam and I's cared about was the reason he was hospitalized. Peter mentioned that the doctor found illegal drugs in Kirin's blood. He stepped up and claimed he was the one using them, and that no one had poisoned him. This answer left everyone even more skeptical. No one actually believed Kirin would use drugs, and Madam and I's quickly figured he was just taking the fall to protect Vila. However, Kirin stuck to his story, stressing that it was his choice and had nothing to do with anyone else, while also demanding his mother stop having a prejudice against his wife. Madam and I's still insisted that Vila wanted to steal the family assets, so she had attacked him. But she sarcastically replied that maybe she was just too obsessed with stories about wives hurting their husbands for an inheritance, which was why she was so quick to judge. Those words instantly made the vibe tense again, and the face-off between the two of them kept escalating. Finally, Kirin was forced to speak up and ask everyone to leave so he could get some rest. Outside the hospital room door, Vila quietly opened up to Peter while feeling like she was about to go into emotional overload. When she brought up the moment she saw Ki-rin collapse, her voice shook and her heart felt squeezed. She remembered the memory from years ago when her own dad collapsed right in front of her, and then left forever without a single word. That fear was still fresh, making her obsessed with the idea that Ki-rin might also vanish from her life the same way. Thinking about that, Vila couldn't hold back her tears. She sobbed like a child, feeling both heartbroken and guilty, because she didn't want him to suffer or get into danger just because of her. She understood clearly that him claiming to use drugs was actually just his way of standing up to protect her from trouble. Peter saw Vila in such a state that he gently hugged her to comfort her. However, that scene accidentally caught Ki-rin's eye from a distance. In his exhausted state, he could only watch and then turn his face away, feeling a mix of frustration and jealousy bubbling up inside him. Afterward, Vila went home to find the maid, Cop, to check for anything weird in the dinner on the night it happened. But Vila immediately walked into another drama that was even more intense. Madam Khanisorn was hosting Min's family, acting all polite but with the hidden goal of smoothing things over and keeping their business relationship alive after the earlier incident. While chatting, she didn't hesitate to drop hints that Min's family was more important than certain people in this house. A line that everyone knew was aimed at Vila. Min's mother was just as bold, demanding she prove those words with actions. And right when Vila appeared, she became the chosen target. Madam Khanisorn called her over, scolding her for claiming to be the lady of the house but refusing to host guests. Then she demanded she prove her love for her son by pleasing Min's family, specifically by going into the kitchen to cook and serve them. Even though she knew this was just a disguised form of humiliation, Vila chose to stay quiet and do it, simply because she didn't want to cause more trouble. In the kitchen, she worked non-stop like a forced chef, while outside, the guests kept changing their orders, demanding one dish, then canceling another as if testing her breaking point. It didn't stop there. They even demanded she clean up and wash the dishes all by herself, not letting anyone help her. The absolute peak of the disrespect was when Min's mother purposely swiped food onto the floor, publicly putting her down while sarcastically saying Vila was perfect for washing dishes and sweeping floors. She even mocked her past of studying abroad, saying it was all just to serve her cleaning skills. The anger inside Vila was at red alert levels, but she still tried to hold it in, until Min dropped a nasty line, comparing her to the pile of trash on the floor. Then all her self-control finally snapped. Vila stood up abruptly, no longer staying silent, but Min kept attacking, even putting down her marriage, saying it only existed on paper, and that she didn't even have a real wedding. This time Vila didn't back down. She fired back bluntly that in today's society, a wedding is just a formality. What matters is that the law has recognized her as Ki-rin's legal wife, and only a slow person would lower themselves to be a side piece and try to squeeze into someone else's happiness. The tension hit a peak when Min got mad and tried to react, but Vila was one step ahead. She shoved Min's head down onto the dining table and used the bowl of soup in her hand to shampoo her hair with it. Screams rang out, making everyone rush in, and Madam Khanisorn immediately turned to scream at Vila, calling her behavior low class. No longer holding back, she bluntly said that trying to act civilized with low-life people was just a waste of her time. Before walking away, Vila left a clear warning that if no one messed with her, this family could stay peaceful. As the lady of the house, she called the maid in to clean up the mess and then left in a vibe so tense it was suffocating. Meanwhile, Min stood there crying, feeling as pitiful as a kid who just lost a game they started themselves. Later, Vila and Kita went to the hospital to visit Ki-rin, but as soon as they walked into the room, they caught a scene that made her freeze for a few beats. Ploy was gently spoon-feeding him. Seeing Vila show up, Ploy got awkward and quickly explained that since Ki-rin wasn't fully recovered yet, she was just helping out and didn't mean anything by it. Vila heard the words, but on the inside she was so jealous she wanted to turn both of them into charcoal. However, on the outside she tried to stay cool, even saying it was good someone was caring for him, and that she was just dropping off food and leaving right away. Ki-rin was still hung up on seeing Peter hugging Vila earlier, so his attitude was clearly cold. He even purposely asked Ploy to keep feeding him fruit as a way to strike back. The vibe in the room instantly got awkward. Ploy felt the tension between the two undercurrents and quickly made up an excuse to take Kita for some cake and bailed on the scene. Left alone with Ki-rin, the vibe got even tighter. Vila stepped closer, put the food down and made it clear she brought soup. Whether he wanted to eat soup or fruit was up to him, and if he liked, he could ask Ploy to come back and help. Hearing that, Ki-rin immediately started complaining, saying she didn't need to play the role of a dutiful wife because no matter how hard she tried, it didn't look real. Those words hit her pride so hard that Vila was done being patient. She coldly replied that if he didn't want to eat, she'd take it back, and from now on, she wouldn't waste time cooking for him anymore. And then she turned to leave. Returning home, Vila found Madam Nami there. This time, she didn't come to visit her grandson Kita. Her main goal was to meet Vila and Madam Khanisorn. Somehow, she had gotten hold of Ki-rin's blood test results and knew he had drugs in his system. With this secret info in hand, she came to blackmail Madam Khanisorn and Vila, demanding they return the rabbit company shares that Vila was holding. Before leaving, she even threatened that if Vila didn't think fast, She might accidentally leak this hot news to the papers. Later, Vila, alone in her room, pulled out a photo of her parents to quietly vent her heart out. She said the reason she came back to this house was for revenge, and she had tried so hard to be strong and win. But at this point she was hesitating because she didn't want Ki-rin to get hurt because of her, and even less did she want his life ruined just because of her grudges. When she opened Ki-rin's drawer, she was shocked to find he still kept the drawings she made as a kid, along with photos of the two of them from when they were little. That moment made Vila completely break down. Tears fell non-stop as she realized his feelings were deeper than she ever thought, while she was standing between too many choices, not knowing how to move forward. The next morning, Madam Khanisorn went to the hospital to see Ki-rin, but it wasn't to check on his health. She bluntly demanded he resign and step down from all management positions in the company. Ki-rin was stunned, not understanding what was happening. Madam Khanisorn said she would let Nun take the position of company chairwoman, but Ki-rin questioned if Nun even agreed with this decision, because he knew for a fact Nun didn't have the ability to handle such a major role. However, Madam Khanisorn just coldly replied that she would stand behind her to support her, while stressing that since he married Vila, he had to accept the sacrifice. Because if Vila didn't return the shares to Madam Nami, the story about him being involved with drugs would be exposed, bringing serious consequences for the whole group. Therefore, him leaving the company was the right thing to do. Actually, that whole plan was being masterminded by Pat. He took advantage of the pressure Madam Nami was putting on them to suggest to Madam Khanisorn that pushing Ki-rin out of the CEO spot would make the plan to put Nun in as chairwoman go much smoother. To make sure they won the upcoming shareholder meeting, Madam Khanisorn actively lobbied more shareholders to join her side. Not stopping there, she even sought out someone she didn't want to see, Madam Nami, to convince her to support putting Nun in as chairwoman. At first, Madam Nami didn't agree and was about to leave, but Madam Khanisorn cut a deal. If Madam Nami helped her in the shareholder meeting, she would force Vila to return all the Rabbit Company shares to her. Hearing that, Madam Nami was practically jumping for joy on the inside, even though she still acted all high and mighty on the outside. Very soon after that, the Board of Shareholders meeting was held. Sitting in the chair position, Madam Khanisorn scanned the room and noticed one shareholder was missing, the one she had lobbied to be on her side earlier. His sudden change of heart made the situation immediately look bad for her. The opposing side quickly took the chance, reminding everyone of the company rule that if less than half the members agreed, the vote would be invalid and they'd be forced to hold it again with a new candidate. However, Madam Khanisorn kept her cool, firmly stating that no other vote would happen. Nun sitting next to her also looked pretty worried that they might lose this vote. Just as the vibe was getting intense, the meeting room door suddenly swung open, and Madam Nami appeared. Madam Khanisorn's smile immediately widened, because this was the ace in the hole she had prepared. Madam Nami's presence instantly balanced the power between the two sides, making the opposition side feel worried. The meeting continued, and Madam Khanisorn proposed putting Nun in to replace Ki-rin. Then she asked everyone to vote. Hands started going up and everyone's eyes were fixed on the final deciding vote. Madam Nami. As her hand was halfway up, the door burst open once again. Ki-rin and Vila appeared, leaving everyone in total shock. As soon as he walked into the room, Ki-rin immediately announced he would run for the position of company chairman himself. This decision almost made Madam Khanisorn explode with anger, because not only did he not resign as she demanded, but he was directly challenging her. She immediately protested, saying he had no right to run, and Madam Nami also rejected the proposal. However, some other shareholders spoke up in support of Ki-rin, leaving the meeting in a total deadlock. Vila stood there reminding everyone that according to the rules, if the parties couldn't agree, the meeting had to be postponed. But Madam Khanisorn still firmly refused to stop and screamed at Vila that she had no right to speak here. While the vibe was as hot as a summer noon, Ki-rin suggested he have a private talk with Madam Khanisorn and Madam Nami, promising that after this talk, he would support whatever decision they made. In the private meeting room, everyone else, including Nun, was asked to step out. After that, Ki-rin bluntly revealed that the drugs in his blood weren't from him using them, but from being poisoned. Vila, standing next to him, immediately pulled out proof, stating she had found the person behind the whole thing. At first, she had suspected many people in the house, but then all signs pointed to the maid, cop. From there, she had secretly investigated and recorded a video showing the maid taking money from Madam Nami. And it was Madam Nami who was behind the incident. She had bribed the maid cop to attack Ki-rin. On the night it happened, the maid cop took advantage of Ki-rin being on the phone to slip the drugs into his tea, which caused him to have a heart attack and faint on the spot. When the video was shown, Madam Nami was practically frozen, while Madam Khanisorn got so mad she was about to lunge at the person who hurt her son. Luckily, Ki-rin stopped her just in time. Madam Nami was so dazed that she only stayed standing because Ploy showed up just in time to catch her. Vila said she was the one who called Ploy there to let her know what her grandmother had done to Ki-rin. At the same time, she also stated she had no intention of keeping the shares she was holding. She also mentioned that Ki-rin never had a plan to merge the Rabbit Company with the Sut Tha Group like Madam Nami thought. However, Madam Nami still didn't believe it, because she figured Ki-rin was someone who couldn't go against his mother, and if Madam and I-san demanded it, he would surely do it. At this point, Ki-rin finally revealed the reason he transferred the shares to Vila. Because he knew his mother couldn't force her the way she did to him. After that, Vila said she would keep the video a secret, while also announcing she would transfer all the shares she held to Ki-ta. She also decisively demanded Madam Nami stay away from Ki-rin, and stop using her late granddaughter for her own personal goals. Leaving the room, Vila explained to Ki-rin that transferring the shares to Ki-ta was the only way to stop the merger plan between the two companies that Madam and I-san was pushing. She also didn't forget to thank Ki-rin for standing up to protect her in front of his mother, and for trusting her even before he knew who was behind the poisoning. When asked why, Ki-rin simply said that because she had admitted before that she didn't hate him, he was sure she would never do anything to hurt him. Finally, he also thanked her for finding out the truth, and for the decision to move the shares to Ki-ta. After all the misunderstandings and jealousy, the two of them finally understood each other better, and the seeds of love began to bloom. On the other side, Madam and I-san had no intention of giving up and quickly looked for a way to flip the script. She went to see the young master Sin-ha, hoping to turn the tide. With a very suggestive tone, she dumped all the blame on Vila, claiming she was the reason Nun couldn't become the chairperson as planned. After listening, Sin-ha kept his usual confident attitude, acting as if the previous failure was just a technical glitch. He bluntly stated that he wouldn't make the same mistake this time. However, he didn't forget to set his terms. If he helped Madam and I-san get what she wanted, he wanted her to help him back. When asked what he needed, Sin-ha didn't beat around the bush and said it straight. He wanted to marry Nun. That evening at a restaurant with a very cozy vibe, Ki-rin and Ki-ta took the initiative to invite Vila to dinner as a way to bond. The two of them arrived first and waited in a pretty relaxed mood. A while later, Vila showed up. Just as she saw them and was about to walk over with a soft smile, someone suddenly pulled her away. After waiting for a long time without seeing Vila arrive, Ki-rin called her, but the phone just rang coldly with no answer.